Good afternoon. It is Monday, December 7th. It's a rainy day, but we are all here. The order of business today is a workshop. We have, let's see, an agenda review, followed by Envision 2030, good of the order, and adjournment. And if we could start with the agenda review, Dr. Atkins. Oh, and I'm sorry, Ms. Fisher is with us. She is on air.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Ms. Fisher.
And Ms. Jordan, I believe we had meant to switch the order of these two because of staff, so.
I was wondering why you're all sitting there. I was excited.
We were wondering, should we move at this point?
You're fine.
And if you're okay with that, then
Absolutely.
I'll go ahead and
Please.
do a little short intro. So this is where we're really breaking the strategic plan down into different areas and doing a little bit more of a deep dive. I would just ask the board for your indulgence. I know that there's a lot of detail in this particular document. We'll try to move it along as quickly as we possibly can. I also want to make the board aware that our team is engaged in some even deeper analysis of our student data as we do a white paper for Envision 2030. So I'm really hoping that when we come out of winter break that we will have even more to provide you. I've been meeting with the academic team now. I feel like now that we're in a good place as it relates to the pandemic. Kind of we're on a bit of a it's becoming routine, so we can get back to really focusing, I think, even more on the academics. So there'll be more to come beyond even what you see today.
Great, thank you.
So having said that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Spiro and his team to take us through this portion of our strategic plan.
Great. And I just wanted to, before they begin, just remind you that originally we had this as two pieces together, the academic piece and also the social emotional piece. And with the depth of the information, we decided to split that. So today you'll be hearing about the academic pieces. Also this morning around 10:30, I sent you an email that contained a link to a Padlet. So if you haven't had a chance to pull that up, if you could pull that up, they will be engaging you with use of that Padlet this morning, or this afternoon, sorry. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Spiro and the academic team.
Thank you, Dr. Atkins, and thank you, Ms. McClung. Good afternoon, everybody, and we certainly are excited to be here with you today to go over with you our journey about our academics around Objective 1 of Envision 2030. And really what our goal is today is really to take you on a journey since we went from asynchronous distance learning back in March all the way through where we are today. So with me up front here today, I have our directors of curriculum and instruction, which will be an integral part of this presentation today. I have Candace Oliveto, who is the director for high school curriculum. I have Dr. Bethany Quisenberry, who's the director for elementary curriculum, and Lori Houchin, who is the director for middle school curriculum. Also behind me, we have a number of our directors with us who are here to answer specific questions that may come up, specifically individuals that worked with us as we were creating this plan. I have Ryan Libby behind me. Ryan is going to be able to answer any questions we have in the area of accountability and assessment. Dr. Rivera, who's behind me, of course, for our ELL. In the back of the room, you see Teresa Bowen. Teresa's director for ESC, and I'm sure that there'll be some questions that are coming up. On my right, your left, also you see Erin Greneville. Erin is here, and she's talked to you before about summer learning, and so she'll be able to answer any questions if things come up that we're unable to address here today. I also have Mr. Chuck Bradley here when we talk a little bit if anything comes up around the area of a social emotional learning. And then Shelley Taylor. Shelley is out there as well. Shelley is here to talk a little bit about our graduation data if there's anything that comes up. So that's our team in support behind us. So we're going to be doing a lot of the heavy lifting and most of the talking today. I would have been remiss if I didn't mention that team because they're a big part of the conversation that we've had. So what we'd like to first do is we talk a little bit about the Padlet. that Cindy talked to you about. Our Padlet is what we have our teachers use now. Padlet is a way for us to go through a presentation and a chance for you to capture questions that you may have during the presentation. It's another technology tool that has come out of this innovative learning model. So we thought today we would take a moment and model with you one of the many tools that our teachers have. And again, the purpose of this tool is for you to capture questions, thoughts, expectations as we go along through the presentation. And as you see up on your screen, there are some headers, and this is really what the major topics we're going to talk about. In a moment, I'm going to do a little exercise with you about capturing your expectation for today. Then we're going to transition into increased learning opportunities, then building and maintaining systems in our schools, resources for instruction for our teachers, how are we monitoring our progress for learning, and then general questions at the end. So you'll keep that Padlet open during this presentation so that you can capture those questions. And then what we have done, we have built in opportunities in this presentation through each of those areas I just mentioned as a chance to pause, answer your questions, and make sure that we're meeting your expectations. So to get us started, what we're going to ask you to do in your Padlet under the area of expectations, go ahead and open that up, and you'll see the plus. And you'll just click on that, and you could just take a moment and add a little comment of what are your expectations for today. And as you're writing that into your Padlet, our team is able to see that and make sure that we're tailoring our questions and our conversation to meet your expectations. So, Candace, if you put a minute on the clock, we're just going to go ahead and do what we do typically. We're going to give you about a minute just to type in your expectations.
Madam Chair,
Yes, ma'am?
I have a question for Dr. Spiro.
Yes,
With
ma'am.
regards to this Padlet, how is it going to be maintained, one, for public records purposes, and two, is it going to be on the screen for sunshine purposes? Because the board really should not be discussing things privately in a email or a text group, things of that nature.
And certainly we could certainly capture these for public records requests, so we have them.
Be on the screen for sunshine, because
We could put them up there for a moment if you'd like, but we did not have an intent to keep them up there the entire time.
So my fear is board discussion in a way that's in violation of sunshine.
Okay.
This is great, but I'm a little concerned, and the board knows I'm very conservative with regards to sunshine law.
We will certainly take our guidance from you, so if you feel this is a tool that would violate any type of sunshine, then certainly we could bypass this particular tool and just go ahead and capture our questions like we normally would during those times as well.
I would recommend that the board be aware of the Padlet, but perhaps not utilize it for their communication and their questions.
And that's fine, and I appreciate the guidance on that. Thank you very much. So what we'll do is when our sections come up, where we stop and we say the Padlet, that's our time where we'll stop and we'll answer questions. So at least you had an opportunity to see a tool that our teachers are exposed to on a regular basis.
Great, thank you.
Can I,
go ahead.
I'm not sure how there's a sunshine violation. I can't see what the other board members are typing in there. And if it can be captured for public records purposes, no discussion is occurring outside of the sunshine.
Dr. Spiro, are they able to see the different comments?
Yes, as you're typing in there, you will be able to see each other's comments as they come up, so it would be available to all participants as typing begins.
So again, we don't want to cause any issues for anybody. So what we'll do is we'll not use the tool, but at least you're exposed to what Padlet looks like. And then during the presentation, when we get to a slide that says Padlet, that's when we'll stop and we'll answer questions along the way. So this is a little bit about our journey that we're going to take you through today. We are going to start with the premise of we knew back in March 2020 that we shifted to distance learning. And again, that was the asynchronous learning. That's what happened. That then influenced how we were going to do our summer learning. What was summer going to look like? How were we going to do summer enrichment? How were we going to do credit retrieval? How were we going to try to do those interventions during the summer? which then influenced the next component was how we're going to retool our schools and our processes once we knew that we were going to be coming back and we were going to be having some variations of distance learning. So that's when we began with creating the innovative instructional model that we know now as Lee Home Connect. And this was all about creating systems inside of our district so it was predictable and it was repeatable. So after we began the retooling process of creating the Lee Home Connect, then we had to start setting some protocols. And if you recall, we had a teacher task force around Lee Home Connect, and they helped provide real clear guidance for us on what resources and supports that we need to have for our teachers. So once we created that Lee Home Connect model, worked through our task force, then we began creating supports for our teachers. What PD do they need? What instructional resources don't we have, but we need to make sure that they have in order to be successful with the Lee Home Connect model, or even the face-to-face as we're transitioning to different types of learning. And what supports, extra supports, do we need to have put in place for not only our teachers, but for our students as well. So that was all work that was done prior to the kids even coming back. We're just going to capture a little bit of that this afternoon as well. Then our students came back for learning. And then, of course, we've done some progress monitoring along the way, and that's where we're going to go in depth to does our data look like. And then finally, we're going to close out this afternoon with what are our next steps moving forward after we get a chance to talk about that data. So this is the journey we're going to take you on. So it's not going to be a typical presentation where we're just going to put up a data slide and walk you through just the data. We're going to talk with you today about what happened behind the scenes to create these systems, and then ultimately, what was the outcome and what are the next steps for each piece of that. So let's go ahead and start with our increased learning opportunities. So March came, we went through asynchronous learning, and then we were getting ready for our summer learning. And Dr. Quisenberry, you want to talk a little bit about our increased learning opportunities?
So we're going to go through each of our summer learning opportunity programs individually. When you combine all of those programs and all of the students that attended those programs, we had an increase in 10,355 students, which would be 215% increase in participation from the previous year for summer. So the first program I would like to review is our expanded learning program. So this was our biggest one. This is the program that we invited all of our kindergarten through 8th grade students to, regardless of their school or their level. We were able to invite approximately 56,000 students. Of those 56,000 students, 13,551 attended. Of the 13,551 that attended, 12,961 completed. That means that they were engaged in the program every week up until the end in the middle of July. So through that program, we were able to provide supports for our ESE students and our ELL students through district support and hiring of teachers. Those ESE and those ELL resource teachers did individual Zoom and breakout sessions for our students as they were engaged in the iReady program. So if the students already had a diagnostic because they were an iReady school, they continued working through that already developed learning path. If they did not have a diagnostic, then they completed one before the program began in June, and that pushed out their learning path that was on their individualized level for ELA and for math, and they worked through that program. They were required to do at least 45 minutes a week in ELA and 45 minutes a week in math. They had a classroom teacher assigned to them who then reached out to the students and the families and either gave praise for them completing their goals, or they worked with them through ways that the next week they could work on completing their goals. If they were not passing their their lessons, then they did individual Zoom meetings to be able to provide that intervention. As we were granted the GEAR funding, it expanded the expanded learning program. It extended it. So originally it was going to be completely virtual, and it was going to end July 16th. Through the acceptance of the GEAR funding, one of the assurances was that we provide face-to-face and that it had to continue until July 30th. So we were able to implement face-to-face expanded learning for 7 of our elementary schools. We ensured that we had 2 to 3 schools in every zone, and then we were able to invite our lowest students at each of those schools for face-to-face. Part of beginning that face-to-face was that we knew that when our students came back that they were going to have social and emotional needs. So our first step was that we pulled all of the teachers, administrators, and the school counselors for that program to complete Capturing Kids' Hearts, which is a social and emotional professional development that really works on building relationships in the classrooms. It does morning meetings, creating student connectiveness, I don't know why I can't say that word, connectiveness, thank you. Student connectiveness with the teachers, and then really works on a lot of those social emotional pieces. So we were excited that we were able to provide that training. And then they were able to use, those teachers use the individualized plan that I'll show you later on in the presentation from iReady, so that they were really targeting those standards that those students needed in the face-to-face. Then the GEAR grant continued to extend, and we provided, as one of the other assurances, we provided after school and Saturday school tutoring for our L300 schools. So we have 6 elementary schools that are in the lowest 300. Those schools were able to provide after school tutoring at least 3 hours each week, as well as Saturday tutoring for the month of October. We had plans for September and October. However, obviously our calendar was pushed back, and the GEAR grant funding had to close by October 31st. So it kind of tied our hands for the amount of time, but they were at least able to get 5 weeks for that tutoring program. And then our last program that we offered was ESY, which is Extended School Year, and it is offered every year for our ESC students that have it as a need in their IEP. So we were able to offer ESY completely virtual. We had 495 students that were eligible according to their IEPs. Of that 495, 207 attended, and 95% of the 123, so we had 297 attend, 123 attended with 70% or more, and of that 123, 95% met their IEP goals. So we felt that that was successful as well.
In addition to the expanded learning at the secondary level, we also needed to continue to offer credit recovery for students who are deficient in credits at the secondary level. We had less students who required this year because of the suspension of the EOCs, which typically adds that 30% component. But so out of that, 81% of the students at the high school level were able to retrieve credit of the 83% that attended, and 83% at the middle school level were able to retrieve credit out of the 59% that attended. And now we're at the end of our increased learning opportunities, so we would have typically used the Padlet, but we're going to ask, do you have any questions about what we've presented so far?
Ms. Morgan?
Expectations as soon as you started speaking, Dr. Spiro, so thank you. I didn't even have to write it down. For expanded learning, how many of the students who participated were students who were struggling students, and how many were successful students? In other words, how many were 1s and 2s, and how many were 3s and 4s?
Do you have that, or do I have?
Because this was voluntary, right? You reached out and you offered it. My assumption would be that students who are looking to stay on track or get ahead would be motivated to participate.
I do have the percent and number of students that were level 1s and level 2s. I do not have it with me, so I can send that to you, because that was part of what we had to present to the state. Of the students that attended, however, and completed, so of the a little over 12,000 that made progress, which I know is going to be your next question, that made progress, which means that according to their progress monitoring, their baseline progress monitoring, they either scored the same score as the previous year or they scored higher. It was 33%.
No, I mean, I think the success is awesome, so my question is, who's participating? Another question, when you offer the after-school tutoring under the GEAR grant, does that provide funds for transportation, or is after-school tutoring limited to those who have a parent pickup or whatever?
Through the GEAR grant, it provided transportation for the after-school as well as the Saturday. Yes.
Okay, do we know why attendance dropped in the virtual school extended year? Because it dropped significantly. Because you have a 95% success rate for those who completed. So again, it seems to me like it's have we identified the motivation?
Are you referring to the ESY? The 95% was for ESY, and that was all virtual. And so that was...
I was looking at VEY?
ESY.
Oh, okay.
Which is extended school year. That's only offered to our students that have it written into their IEPs.
Okay.
So it was a much smaller number of students. It was only 495 students that were eligible.
Yeah, but a significant number of them dropped out. So, so the question is, and you don't have to answer these questions now, but these are the questions that I was thinking of as you were going through. I don't expect you to answer them now. Do we know why people are dropping out of these? Please don't answer the question. That's it for me.
Are you sure?
Sure. Teresa's here to
Answer or no?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's why we brought our team here. We knew there would be questions that would come up along the way, and so they're here to help fill in the details of areas where maybe we don't have the answer right now. So, Ms. Bowen?
So our families that we heard from regarding extended school year, the virtual component, many of them that didn't want to continue were just, they voiced that they needed a break. They had been doing virtual learning at home at that point, and they were kind of hoping that there would be some face-to-face. And then when it didn't pan out, it was just, they needed a break.
Great,
That's what
thank
we
you.
heard.
Thank you. Ms. Vaughn?
Yes. I know that with this, we're looking at the L2025 and ELL and ESE and all of that. What I'm wondering is, do you have any kind of data on our top performing students who have scored end of course exams in the upper levels? I'm curious whether those who have been successful had an erosion of that, and if we've kept track of that.
So one of the pieces we're actually going to look at a little later in the presentation is a brand new data dashboard that we have this year for our schools to utilize. And when we're looking at that, you can actually see where the students started. So you can look at your 4s and 5s, see what their Q1 grades were, see what their progress monitoring, and then see how are they doing on individualized standards. So when we start to see a deficit or a gap in those standards, we can remediate right away. So we do have a platform we're going to be able to share with you during this presentation that will look at that data as well.
Okay, because just using a personal example with my grandson, who's now an eighth grader, in the fourth quarter, getting his work done and getting it done successfully, I hate to say a piece of cake, but it was all A's, and he really excelled with it. This year, it's really dropped, and he had been scoring in 7th grade before the virtual. He had been making all A's, and now all of a sudden it's really dropped. He's an average level, but he's a fairly high achiever in the average level. So I'm wondering if that's the trend, that we had a lot of kids because there was a lot of grace given to the kids and a lot of extra opportunities, and
I think we would think a lot of those are all mitigating factors.
Is that a trend?
We see for some of when we talk to a lot of our parents that we speak with, we do see, remember, they went from asynchronous learning, self-paced. Yes, there was a lot of grace. This was the first time we've all had to transition to this type of learning modality. So certainly giving students multiple opportunities to be successful, we saw that a lot. Then summer came, and we did try to capture as many kids as we could during the summer, which is why we think an offshoot of what happened with this expanded learning is really rethinking how we're going to do summer school moving forward, because we think we're going to be able to capture more students at both the enrichment level as well as the intervention level, and we're starting to go to work on that now. So we really think it's just a new opportunity. So now that we're back to synchronous learning, yes, now the rigor, certainly it's not where we want it to be, but it certainly has increased the rigor based around next to asynchronous is what we experienced at the end of last year. So what you experienced was certainly a common theme that we would have seen.
Yeah, and he's still doing the Lee Home Connect because parents are worried about COVID. So, I was just curious if that was kind of a trend, that those who've stayed with the virtual platform did really well last year, and which actually, as I said, it was typical of what he had been doing during regular school time, if that's a trend. I've kind of heard some stories like that, but it's just all, anecdotal, so I have no idea.
Thank you. No? Okay, Ms. Gittens.
Hangover. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Okay, my question is, of the, how many was it? I think 200 kids of the 495, 207 attended at least one day, so the 123. My question has to do with what percentage of those kids were tracked into the regular school year? Or are they still being tracked to see how they're progressing at this point based on their extra work, and those that didn't get that?
For the ESY, yes, because those students are working on an IEP, and so they continue to track those students and their IEP goals. So yes.
And so were all of the ones that were in that ESY were IEP students?
So the ESY extended school year is for students that have an IEP, and it indicates in their IEP that they need ESY.
Is it later in the presentation where you're going to talk about the others that do not have an IEP?
Yes, we're going to dive deep into the data. So we're just taking you through. We went through asynchronous. Here's what happened during the summer, and we're getting ready to transition into getting ready for the start of the year, and what does that data look like?
And some of the new data dashboard that you talked about is being done now. Is this being done by the teachers as a part of their tracking and doing the curriculum, or is this something that's done at a different, higher level?
And this is an administrator dashboard right now, so we could take a look at where we are. This is a new product that we've just rolled out to the principals and our system principals.
Okay, so the tracking of these students and all that as well is at an administrative level.
For the one we're going to show you, but certainly our teachers have their iReady individual reports as well. We have Compass, so they have their individual tracking that they use deep down in the classroom, but specifically what you're talking about with the dashboard we're going to show you right now, that's for principals and assistant principals.
And basically it was just to say, are we adding more on the plate of the teachers to track each of these students to make sure they're on target?
Yeah, our goal has always been to try to take off our teachers' plate and to streamline till we get as close as we can to individualize for kids.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, I have a question. I know my grandkids took this during the summer, and I know the one teacher, I spoke to them, they had 75 students plus for each one of them. And when I was speaking to them, then they had an animated person who was actually like the teacher, because I was like, who is this talking? And when I went in, it's just this little person speaking to them. So that's how they were taught for this summer. And I know you said they completed, but did they complete successfully, or they just complete it?
So
I know she had to take the test
you're asking
before.
two different things. So whether or not they made progress, which was the 33%, meaning that they went up or they maintained according to their progress monitoring, which got really fuzzy because remember, we didn't give a diagnostic to every student. We only, in an attempt to get it off the ground and have the students do less at home. If they already had a diagnostic because they were an iReady school, we did not push out an additional one. So half of the students that were in the summer program, their diagnostic was from third quarter or from December. The other half who were not, which I believe your grandchildren were not in an iReady school, they took a diagnostic in June. So their diagnostic is, their progress monitoring is really quick. It's from June to August, which is really difficult, right, to show a significant growth. And so of those students that participated, 33% maintained or went up according to their diagnostic. The other question you're asking is, were they successful in completing the program, meaning did they meet their goal of 45 minutes and were they passing their lessons? That's where that other piece was coming from, the 12,961. Those students met their goal and they were passing their lessons. So
So the ones who did not, they went and followed those children to make sure that they were where they need to be.
yes.
Okay. So
And one of our key takeaways we learned this summer, when we were rolling out the summer school virtually for the first time ever, when we had a chance to go back and really reflect on what could we do differently moving forward, one of the pieces we said, we need to make sure we do a pre and a post in a more timely manner so that we can really see if what we're doing during the summer, is it really working? And that was one of the pieces that we missed because we weren't really worried about honestly gauging how far the students learn, but making sure that we had an opportunity for them to engage in enrichment and intervention activities, because we were creating these as it was happening. We're creating on the back end as well. So we didn't have the time to do that. And so looking back, we need to do that, and that's on our list as we retool what summer school is going to look like.
No, I think that's good, and it did prepare, I know the one, 'cause she didn't really need it, but she wanted to do it, but it did prepare her for the 4th grade, so she had an advantage. So I thank you for doing that.
So now we're going to move forward. So we've talked a little bit about, remember, March was asynchronous. Bethany just walked you through summer expanded learning. And now at the same time while that is going on, we were beginning to build our systems. We thought it was very important that as a school district, we had a very clear system in place of what was going to happen as we transitioned to our Lee Home Connect model. So the first thing we thought about is, you see the left-hand side of the screen is mindfulness. We really wanted to make sure that we had our teacher's heart in mind, and we kept that on as we were creating this framework for a new type of learning returning back to school. So one of the first things we did, remember, is we granted that extra 2 weeks of professional development. So time is always one of those key elements that oftentimes we don't get in a schoolhouse to really prepare for students. And we really thought it was valuable enough to make sure our teachers had at least 2 weeks to prepare for our students coming back. Then at the same time, as we gave time, we had to create those safety protocols, like what does it look like in the classroom? So when kids come back, remember, we were creating those structures that were across the entire district the same. So how we set up our classrooms, how students enter the classroom, how students exit the classroom. We had to make sure school safety was paramount before anything else. Then we were creating that professional development. And we did for our teachers, it was choose your own path. So we had all these professional learning opportunities for teachers, but a teacher may already know and be proficient in a particular instructional resources that is there for them. So now they may want to learn something new. So during that 2 weeks, they had an opportunity to create their own professional development path that meet their individual need as a teacher. And then we, as a district team, had to make sure we had instructional resources available for our teachers that met the new type of learning. And that's what our team's going to share with you a little bit about. What were those instructional resources that we had in place? What did that professional learning look like? Because we think it's important for us, before we get to the data, to say, here are the systems we created, here's the support we provided teachers and schools, here was the resources we provided teachers and schools before we even let the kiddos back into our building. I think Lori's going to take it from here.
Thank you. So one of the things that we did to help build our foundation was work with teachers and work with our teams. We presented all of the checked items last time, so I'm going to concentrate on the bulleted. One of the things that we knew we needed to do differently with having some virtual instructional models that we didn't have before is that we needed to increase engagement opportunities for our students on screen and off screen. So that meant revising our instructional guides, but also purchasing some different tools that would help with engagement, as well as we knew we needed to have frequent checks, teachers like informal checks for teachers to have that opportunity. We also increased our training. So just for Q1, just our team, we held 384 trainings and trained almost 8,000 teachers just in Q1, between summer and Q1. Teachers were really reaching out for help. We were building very strong partnerships with those teachers. And then, as Candace alluded to, we have a new data dashboard that we will show you later. Another thing, I said we wanted to increase our partnerships or build stronger partnerships. So we started with administrators.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Time. Thank you, everybody.
So we have our principal leads and our equity leads, and they have their teams of principals that they meet with and mentor, so that we have good systems of support and that we have great connection between district and then the school level, so that we're all working smarter. We also increased our training for assistant principals of curriculum, so we expanded it to elementary APCs this year, and as well as continuing on with secondary. And then we also, every school has an administrator that oversees a PLC, a content area PLC. So that was something new that we did this year, is that we now have administrator PLCs for that content area. So we're able to work with them to build their standards knowledge, let them know what formative checks are coming up, what look fors, and allow them to share best practices so that we can continue to enhance our curriculum. And then we also continued with and expanded our leading and learning. So our leading and learning came about as a need for making sure that we were building capacity of standards-based instruction. And before we were having, say, like an English person come, and they were having to get too much information about all different grade levels. So now we have like a 6th grade team and a 7th grade team and an 8th grade team and so forth and so on for our core subjects, and we meet with them quarterly. But our curriculum team, we like push out information to them about every 2 or 3 weeks with tips and practices. They have shared drives, but it's a way for them to look at the current data, what the district data is showing, then what their school level data is showing, what's working, what's our opportunities, allows them to share best practices for who moved the needle, so those teachers get to share, bring that information from their teams. And then we target the next quarter standards, and we go over what those look like. We go over the achievement level descriptors so that it tells us for each standard what a level 2 student can typically do versus a level 3 versus level 4 versus a level 5, so that we can keep increasing that target. So our leading and learning teams, we have over 1,000 teachers who participate in that quarterly, but really it's more than that because we're in constant contact with them. And these are all of the different courses that we service. And we've also seen, as a result of building this capacity at the school, we've seen these partnerships really increase, but we've also seen, like, our curriculum maps and our instructional guides, they've really increased. They've gone up 226% in the number of hits on our instructional resources, which shows that everybody's kind of looking at those things and looking at their resources and deciding what will best fit the needs of their students and having rich conversations as a result. So that's 1.8 million hits since the year began so far.
So those are our systems. So we talk about systems of support. So what Lori's talking to you is about the system of support we have for administrators, how we're supporting them, how that's getting down to the PLC, and then what is our system of support for teachers to make sure we have a common message that reaches all the way down in the classroom. All of that was put in place prior to our kids coming back to make sure there was a common approach across the district. And now we'll talk a little bit about what were the resources that we did. What were the new resources for instruction?
So with that, we're going to shift gears a little bit. We've talked about the foundations and maintaining those systems and getting down into our PLCs. But as when we thought about that engagement and student accountability, we realized we could flip a lot of our resources in our instructional guide, and we learned a lot of going digital Q4. But we realized we needed one more tool. We needed another partnership. So we're going to talk about the partnerships we've developed since the beginning of the year. And Nearpod is one of those. Nearpod is a resource that not only is used with our Lee Home Connect students, but it's also used with our face-to-face students. So Nearpod was a purchase of an instructional tool that allows us to engage all of our learners and provide them with accountability. It gave teachers a way to know, was that student really engaged with them? Our teachers have said this has been a game changer for them. Those are some of their words there. Much like on your screens today, you have the presentation launched with you because we wanted to be able to make sure we were showing you some of the data elements up close and personal. That's what Nearpod does for our students as well. The teachers are able to launch a lesson and it plays on the student's screen. The student can't move beyond what the teacher wants them to do. It allows them to be accountable for the work that they have, and it's a collaboration tool. So when we think about our students who are at home and our students that are in our classrooms, it gives them another way to really collaborate with each others. Teachers can launch engaging lessons, provide them hands-on without really being hands-on, but then also meet the needs of some of our learners. And when I say that, I mean they can have enhanced audio that's there. They can add videos that's there. They can go out to the web. But more importantly, they can also allow it to have dictation read to them. They can do line readers. It provides them resources that they needed that we learned from Q4 that we were not able to do. So this is a tool that we've added, and we're supporting it by those leading and learning teams, but really getting into our hybrid classes and our Lee Home Connect classes to model this has been the greatest resource from the curriculum team out to our teachers. And I've got to throw a shout out to Dr. Atkins and say thank you. He actually joined 2 of our hybrid classrooms to see Nearpod in action. So we're actually going to step out of the presentation for just a second, because I think the best way for you guys to be able to see what Nearpod is be able to experience it for just a second. So when we look here of what's on the screen, this is a tool that if a student needs something,
Immersive Reader is an excellent learning tool built within Nearpod for all learners. It provides opportunities to differentiate learning whether the student is a beginning reader, a struggling reader, or an ELL learner.
so that's an example of it being read to. But if we think about some of the accommodations our students need, as a teacher, I can go in and I can focus it in for one line. When I think about accommodations that my students need, maybe they have dyslexia and there's a color background that they need and that's specific to their IEP, I can go in there and I can set those pieces. So when it's presenting on their screen, they have that ability to see it. So that's a nice resource within here that we didn't previously have that has been an addition for our students. In addition to that, we know not all of our textbooks were available online. We had to work with our publishers to what could we do to make sure our students had access to their online materials. So here you're seeing a snippet of an online resource, a textbook clip that's in there. There's a question for the student: how does heat energy flow? Highlight the evidence. So now the student has the ability to go down here, add a text box, and type their answer, and they can also go in and they can follow the directions and highlight what their answer is. The teacher is seeing all of this. So if I am the student and I'm not participating, the teacher right away knows who it is. The rest of my classmates don't know, but the teacher knows. So then when I go out into small groups or I'm breaking into independent work, I'm able to work with those students who need it. The other piece is, as we were going to do a collaborate board today with you, a Padlet, is we use that a lot. Inside Nearpod, it's built directly in. So this is an area where it's peer interaction, where a question can get posed and the students are able to type their thoughts here. And I know one of our biggest things as educator is, can I check that before it gets posted anywhere? The answer is yes. So the student types what they're thinking, they answer their question, and then they hit post. The teacher sees it first before it posts to the classroom board. My peers can then respond to what I have typed here. So this is another formative tool that's inside of Nearpod. And then one of our last pieces that we wanted you to be able to see is these virtual reality experiences here. Our students are not able to take as many field trips as they would like, as we used to, but we still need to bring them so they're engaged with that. So here, you can see I went into the actual VR mode. I can pretend like I have those goggles on. These are the Everglades right here. So this is actually tied to our standards, what the students need to do, and they can experience it firsthand. And then we can pose those same questions to them. So to date, what we have just as of last week, so this is 1 week's worth of data, our teachers launched 3,292 lessons just last week utilizing Nearpod. It's available to all content areas and all levels. That was the other benefit to it. With the formative assessment pieces, so students having to be engaged and held accountable for their work, 158,000 formative assessments were launched just last week, and 52,000 students were engaged in at least one lesson inside of Nearpod. So when we talk about things that we've added to really support our classrooms and our teachers and our students, this is something that's new that we continue to focus on and help provide that professional development.
So another resource that we have spoken a few other times about is the addition of iReady. So we were utilizing iReady in our elementary schools for the past 2 years as a pilot. This year, we have expanded to have all but 6 of our elementary schools in the pilot, and all of our middle schools have joined. iReady has been a great resource, as we know that there is such a need for individualized instruction, whether it's intervention or it is extension, as what Ms. Vaughn was talking about earlier. So we wanted to be able to give you an opportunity to see what the teachers and what the families see for data and how it is used in iReady. iReady has really began to transition us so that we are not using data of instruction, and instead we're using data for instruction. So what you see in front of you is what the students will have so far. Once they take their diagnostic, it gives them a graph for their overall, based on their scale score, and based on what their typical growth would be during the school year, their standard growth, and then what is on grade level at that time and what is mid-year on grade level at that time. The most important piece that it pushes out, though, is it gives scale scores as well as data for each individual standard and domain. So you'll see on the bottom for this individual student, which, by the way, this is stock. This is not any of our students. This is coming from iReady, so it's just an example. But it gives the placement for each of the domains. So just because a student is a level 3 or a level 4 or a level 1 does not mean that they are that level in every single standard or every single domain. So this really breaks it down for the teachers and for the families so that they know what they really need to focus on. Go ahead. At the end of the year, once they have additional data points, because they take iReady 3 times a year, there's a baseline, a mid-year, and then an end of year. It will give each of their diagnostics. After the second diagnostic, it will determine what that student's stretch goal and typical goal, which is correlated to making a learning gain by the end of the school year. So how much gain should that individual student be able to make by the end of that school year? And then it will track whether or not they made that goal. The next piece that the teachers are really utilizing this year for intervention as well as enrichment is it takes the teacher's class. As I said, it breaks it down by domain, but then it breaks it into additional instructional groups. So a teacher will go to their instructional grouping report, and it will show what specific students have the same needs, but then it goes even a step further. Go ahead. And shows specific to that need what grade level. So let's say you teach 5th grade and you have a group of students that in their instructional grouping, they have a need for phonological awareness, which is a good 2 to 3 years, at least 3 years below grade level. It tells you exactly not just what domain to focus on, but then the teacher is able to print out lesson plans that are specific for each of those students' needs, and it gives them what to work in small group or one-on-one with those students. And again, this goes all the way through to middle school. It really takes a lot of that work off of the teacher because it gives them the lesson plans, it gives them the activities to do with them. They don't have to go, scrambling to find something to do. But then it also really breaks it down so that we're sure that the teachers are giving explicit instruction for what that student needs, no matter what domain or what the grade level is. And then another, it's not an additional piece, but we're using it differently, is the ALEX program. So before the ALEX program was it's a math intervention program, and it was in the middle school. Well, with the addition of iReady, we have been able to move ALEX up into algebra and geometry, which has helped us to make sure that we have a math intervention plan from kindergarten all the way up to geometry to be able to meet all of our students' needs. As Candace was talking about Nearpod and some of the barriers that social distancing and our virtual platforms have created, it was especially relevant in science. So science, you have to touch it and feel it and work through it for your labs. And so in the beginning of the year, as our teams began to work with teachers, they were very concerned about how do we continue, because we'd really increased our hands-on interactions with science last year, especially in the elementary, and how can we continue to ensure that our students were getting that need? So our team began to do live investigations using streamable learning. So every other week, our elementary science team does a live lab based on whatever standard they're working on at that time for 5th grade. They go into, anytime you pop into one of these rooms on a Friday, they're in one of these rooms and it's all set up with all of the labs. It is live, and Candace is going to go out into one. It's live and it's interactive. So the teachers, whether it's for their class for face-to-face or the students at Lee Home Connect, they log in. They're able to ask questions through the chat or make comments through the chat. And Jen McBride, who is the elementary science coordinator, and Jared Wallace, who is the coach, they engage with the students. As the students are asking them questions, they're answering the questions or asking questions back out to them and really working through that hands-on. We have had a total of 10,913 connections, and each connection could be 20 to 25 students, because if the teacher is logging in just for their class, then that is the entire class as one connection. So they've had such a positive feedback with it that they have increased it to have 2 live lessons a day a week instead of just 1. And the teachers are really grateful. Again, this is one thing that we can take off of the teacher's plate for them having to plan for, because not all of us are comfortable with implementing science labs, right? And so, and then it ensures that our students are engaged and getting all of the pieces that they need through this time.
There you go.
They're going to
You're going to have a question. You're going to be able to answer ask the question in like 2 minutes. You're almost there.
You're good. Keep it with, you're in sync.
So social studies is another area of opportunity for us. So one of the things we did was we changed the progression this year because we were finding that without having U.S. history before civics, our students really weren't understanding a lot of what the questions were asking, and we looked at other districts who were outperforming us, and they had U.S. history prior to civics. So that's one of the things that we changed. But we also worked with our teachers. We looked at our teachers' data, and we determined which teachers were really moving the needle and getting more students to pass the civics EOC and the U.S. history EOC. And we worked with those teachers, and they helped us to enrich our instructional guides. One of the things that they put together is this YouTube channel. This YouTube channel is really cool because it takes the main concepts and then it kind of walks it through. So even a substitute could use it, a teacher could just use it to get better at it and then teach it, or the teacher could use it as a lesson. I'm going to let Candace show you just a bit of it.
The colonists began boycotting British goods. Boycott meant that the colonists refused to buy products like clothing and other manufactured goods from Britain. Instead, groups like the Daughters of Liberty made their own products. once Britain realized that the Sugar Act wasn't being
So it just does that animated drawing and talks them through that concept, but it has a lot of different places for students to do some distributed summarizing so that it can process the learning and has some built-in formatives as well. So we're getting quite a bit of hits on this YouTube for the district.
So those were some of our overall pieces that we have pushed into all of our classrooms. Now we're going to talk pretty quickly about some of our layered support. So first, for our ESE students, what you see are things that we have continued in elementary, secondary, and for our deferred graduates to be able to support our ESE students. What we have added for this school year is some response services. So if you click, we've added additional specialized curriculum and software, as well as additional instructional and therapy supports and services. You'll see on the screen how they have been able to tier the support, as well as provide additional professional development to our ESE resource teachers, as well as our gen ed teachers who are supporting ESE students in their classrooms.
Dr. Rivera and her team does a really great job at looking at what English language learner supports need to be like. We have different types of English language learners. So we have some that come to us that have never been in school before, some that have interrupted schooling. And so they look at which programs cross over and which programs are specific to that type of learner. So we really work on the language immersion for students that really have no formal schooling or are really deficient in the English language. And then we look at programs that help build fluency of language and fluency of math. And so those are some of the programs that are used. In addition, they look at where paraprofessional support needs to be added based on the number of ELL populations. They look at what after-school tutoring programs need to be in which area. We have graduation plans to make sure that those students, like we're monitoring those students to make sure they're meeting those targets. SIOP, which is the Sheltered Instruction Observation Protocol, is a training that it works well with lots of students, but it's, you know, we really use that for teachers who have a high population of ELLs. To date, we have 800 teachers trained in SIOP at the various levels. And this is a population that we continue to monitor because every year we're showing that a 1.2% increase in the number of students that are coming to our area. And so we have to continually look at how to better service those students. And Dr. Rivera really has her eye on those targets. So that concludes our building and maintaining systems. And so we'll take questions at this point.
So just as a refresher, so for this section, we talked about how are we supporting administrators, how we were using leading and learning to push all the way down in the classroom, providing new resources like Nearpod, expanding that individualized learning through use of iReady and using ALEX as a mechanism for monitoring that learning as well, layering our support for ELL and our ESE students. And then after this section, we're going to dive into the data for you. So this is about system support.
Thank you. Ms. Gittens, now.
Oh. I'm on? Oh my God.
You're on.
Okay.
That was a lot, sorry.
No. First, I want to ask, where is the LCSD dictionary of terms?
For all the acronyms?
For the, yes, please. It would be nice to have that like in a Google spot. So as you're.
Key on every page, right?
Yes, you know, just so you can go there to Google and open it up and find out what the PQRSTUV is, you know?
I understand.
Okay, so I mean, I really would suggest giving us that opportunity. And also on Nearpod, is it a requirement? Is it a resource? Is it a tool? Is it a must? The teachers must do it?
It's another resource we really were looking for. How could we engage our students. Because our engagement at that point was a big concern, because we had all these students going to Lee Home Connect, and we're trying to figure out what can be a vehicle we can use to really engage our students as well by supporting our teachers. And so Nearpod is another resource available for every teacher, no matter what modality they're teaching.
Okay.
Add to that, one of the great things that we loved about Nearpod is twofold. So we were able to take our lessons that are in our instructional guides for teachers and put them directly into Nearpod for them, so it takes the work off of teachers. But if you think about teachers' lessons and things they've already created with Google and Google Slides, because everything we did with quarter 4, it's an add-on for Google Slides. So it wasn't additional work. They could drop their lessons that they were already comfortable with and put it directly in Nearpod and now have student engagement and student accountability. So when we added that piece, we really thought, how can we add something that takes something off a teacher's plate?
And Nearpod, you can record live sessions like you were saying, and then students are able to access them later.
Yes, you can do recordings on slides. So if you think about students who need to hear it and go back to, you can do recordings on the slides.
Okay, we had gotten an email from someone in Lee Virtual. I don't know if that was shared with you, about the inability to record the live lessons. So that may be some follow-up for Lee Virtual teachers in your training to let them know that it is possible and how they can do it. Thank you.
I noted that. Thank you.
Ms. Giovanelli, please.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. They were saying that they've had to purchase another program that helps them, because with the Lee Virtual, kids may not, they may be working at a late hours, and so the Nearpod did not work for them on that. But so, and that led me to think about the live investigations. How does that help Lee Virtual if it's live and immediate? Then I don't.
Sure. So Nearpod is available. It's a resource so it's always available 24/7 for whenever a teacher wants to access it. The streamable science lessons you saw, we had those recorded. So there's a separate web page that's available, and all of those labs are recorded, and/or the teacher can plan for it and participate live. So if the teacher is not able to participate live, he or she could embed that into a lesson, and it might be an activity a student does prior to coming back to a class to get them thinking about or maybe understanding a concept, and then they come back and engage in it. So, and I think it's right there on the screen for us as well. So all of our teachers are able to access all those recordings to Ms. Giovanelli.
Yeah, because I just think it's important, especially with Lee Virtual as large as it is now. It's our largest school. We want to make sure we're having the resources for everybody. So
100%.
Thank you.
100%.
Ms. Vaughn?
Yeah, a couple just minor things. Back on leading and learning teams, ACE general paper is listed for high school. Has that become an option in lieu of English 4?
We have expanded ACE general paper to all schools, so all schools have access to ACE general paper now.
Whether they do Cambridge or not. Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Now, they still had to apply they had to go to the process to become an approved Cambridge school in order to offer the course, because you do have to go through that process. Not everyone can just offer the course without going through the approval process. And then it has been added as an option for our students and candidates. You want to talk about how high schools are currently using that?
Sure thing. And it's one of the things afforded to us by the Florida Department of Education, that course can be utilized as an elective course or as an English credit. So when it's offered at 9th and 10th grade, it's utilized as an elective credit when they're entering that Cambridge program, and they take it as an elective to help build those skills in their English class. As we're looking at the students and looking at our data and what can we do to help some of our students who are struggling in English, is we looked at the ACE General Paper course and the standards that were aligned and what's taught in that course, and providing our students another opportunity. So it's a course that really has a lot of real-world application for them and trying to engage them in learning in another way. These are students that have shown that they have struggled throughout. So for those students in English 4 is where we're utilizing it right now, is if they take that course, it can count for them as their English 4 credit. So trying to give them that other opportunity. You can only use it one time for one English class. So it cannot replace all of your English class. classes. It just depends where. So again, in 9th and 10th grade, we utilize it as an elective, and in 11th and 12th grade, we utilize it as an English. If we see the students, so when we talk about our data and monitoring our systems, we are checking in with those students every 3 weeks and how they're doing in the course, because the coursework is rigorous. So when we're looking at what they're reading and writing, it is rigorous coursework. It's just different because it relates to some more of the content that at that interest level when we're thinking about interest and engaging. So we do meet with students though who are not progressing to see if it's not the best opportunity and move them at the quarter and or the semester if needed.
Okay, yeah, I'm generally familiar with general paper, and it probably corresponds more to, let's say, freshmen, because it's a writing, it's a analysis and writing. Okay, and you know I came from Estero, which is a Cambridge school, and of course all the Cambridge classes there, including general paper, you'd get that, the boost in the GPA. So is that something that happens here if a student?
It is a weighted course, yes.
So it's a weighted course.
And it does allow the
I'm
opportunity for
sorry?
and it does allow a student possibly the opportunity for bright futures because it is an advanced course.
Okay, and do they take the exam?
Yes, they will take the exam when they finish the course. So they will meet all the same requirements regardless of the grade level in which they take the course. They will still sit for the exam at the end of the year, just as though we have used it historically down in 9 and 10. We were looking for another way to engage our upper level students who maybe English is a struggle, and we had seen great success with the ACE general paper. East Lee County High School last year had offered it to some of their seniors who had struggled previously, and the students were engaged in that class. When you walked in and saw the level of conversation, that analysis that was happening, because the text, instead of reading multiple long passages of text, as you know with what the FSA looks at, this was more they could digest it and engage in those conversations. So we decided to expand it to all of our high schools who went through the application process that were able to offer the course. Those high schools could utilize it for an English credit for English 4.
Okay.
It's just another one of our opportunities. As we know, we're always looking at interventions for students, but also at the same time, how are we continuing to offer upper opportunities for our students at the other end as well?
So 2 more questions corollary to that. Do you have a mix of Cambridge students and non-Cambridge students in those classes then? The general paper, like the,
those schools
are going for the Cambridge diploma.
Right, they're not all diploma-seeking schools. So they're just like it would be like if you had an advanced placement course at a school, right? I might take 1 or more advanced placement courses. This is another opportunity to give students access to some of the most rigorous courses that we can offer.
So you would or would you
not.
have other?
If you were a diploma-seeking student, you would take ACE general paper in your 9th and 10th grade
Right,
year.
right.
And if you're looking to take the course for the opportunity to engage in additional advanced coursework, you're going to take it as a junior and senior. So your diploma students are taking it as a different
You
time
wouldn't have
frame.
it, a mix, which that's another story, but it's important. Final question is, where are you getting all these teachers? How are you getting them training? I remember my really good friend at Estero, who had taught general paper for many years, beginning of this school year was helping the band director teach it.
So since that conversation, I recall the conversation very well. That's why Candace is shaking her head. We are looking for funds to make sure that all teachers that are taking advanced academic programs have the professional development needed to teach those courses. Candace can verify with you that we have her and Mr. Simmons, so that is part of our plan to make sure that that happens, because we agree we need to make sure that as we're expanding these course offerings, that teachers have the training that they need to help them to be successful, to help our students be successful. So we heard you.
Exactly. And you know how I feel about they need to have training if
Correct.
they're teaching this upper level. And I just missed something earlier. What did you say in the History Illustrated YouTube? what did you say was the source of those videos? I missed what you said.
Teachers.
We developed those, so we had teachers who had really great data, like astounding data. And so they worked with our instructional guides and they helped create these like anchor lessons is what we call them. And so they're in-house, they're built in-house.
Wow, okay. None of them then come from those little things you click on from the corollaries to the textbooks?
No, it's all in-house. I mean, obviously we research textbooks and we research like Khan Academy and things like that, but they're built in-house.
Yeah, because when I observed at Estero a while back, I saw, I guess it was one of your little, and it was quite impressive. So, yay.
I'll pass that along.
And so these were some of the offshoots of, these are some of the good things that came out of having to really think differently.
Yeah.
I'm going to force that creativity and that innovation that probably we would not have seen before, in the sense of how can we really engage kids using technology. We always knew technology as a tool to support instruction, but how do we really make sure that we're using that? Ms. Gittens?
One last question. On slide 21, right-hand side, we just went through a conference with FSBA, and one of the speakers was, one of the presenters talked a lot about rigor on grade level and remedial work and how all of that correlates together. And that as I'm looking at this slide, I don't know if you have that up there with the instructional groupings.
Yes.
And this is grade 5. And looking at this, though, we've got several students, well, nobody is actually, well, just a couple of them are on grade 5 level. And some are even as far as 3rd. How do we manage this? His nugget, at least from, and you can correct me, but what I took away from it is that if we have a student that's remedial, let's say 3rd grade, and we continue to give them 3rd grade and 4th grade, and they're in 5th grade, they never have to reach. And we don't know that if they reach, they might, something might go off and they decide, oh, okay, now I get this.
Right.
How do we offset that?
So, and I know Bethany's going to jump in here in a minute with this example, but also remember you have on grade level instruction. Then at the same time, then you also have interventions during the school day that allow teachers to use these reports to make sure that they group like students that have a standard or skill that they need remediation in to make sure they get that extra support so they can get back on grade level. So students will experience both during a regular school day because we still have to do on grade level instruction, but at the same time bring up areas where they're not making that adequate progress. And Bethany, if you want to elaborate.
That's a great question, and we completely support and agree with what you're saying and what they said. And that is a training that we work through with the Leading and Learning, as well as just this morning with our assistant principals, of ensuring that we have an on-grade level block. So in the elementary, it is the 90-minute reading block, and they're required to have a 75-minute math block. That 60 minutes of it is on grade level with scaffolding, of course, but then 30 minutes of it is, 20 minutes. Look at my math is not, I can't even subtract 75 of intervention. And then for ELA, they have a separate intervention time. So we get that question a lot from teachers, and we have to work with PLCs a lot because they'll see a report like this and they'll say, my students are so low, I need to work on this, they can't handle this. And so we work through, we start at on grade level, and we ensure that they are exposed to, and we work through the rigor of the on grade level, and then we scaffold down in small group and then provide interventions that are outside of their grade level in their intervention block. In middle school and in high school, it looks a little different because they have specific courses. So they get their on-grade level course, and then they get their intervention course. In elementary, it gets a little fuzzier because we have to build those times into our day.
Because that was where the question came from me with high school, because you can get pigeonholed into remedial math and English and this and that, and you never dig out of the hole. And you never get the opportunity to say, well, but in this subject, I really can,
That's right.
achieve. So that was my question. How do we make sure, especially at the high school and middle school level, we don't pigeonhole, especially minority
That's where
students?
that school counselor is so crucial, because we are really dedicated to looking at kids individually. That's why we took time to show you these individualized reports, because we have to work on those deficiencies. But on the other end, students are also brilliant and bright in other areas, and we want to make sure that we're exposing them to the most rigorous opportunities in a school day for them. They might need extra support in math, but they might be on grade level and or above in other areas as well, so we don't ever want to pigeonhole students. And that is a constant conversation that's had, especially with Lori Brooks and Mary Lynn Rodriguez, with the school counselor team, and making sure that they are the gatekeepers to open access for students, as opposed to being a gatekeeper for pigeonholing students as well.
Keeping them there, especially in high school when they're in double blocks and they can't do other things that other students are doing. Anyway, thank you.
So those were the systems that we talked about.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Ms. Fisher, I'm sorry, did you have any questions? Ms. Fisher?
Sorry, I wanted to unmute up. Excuse me. No, I didn't have any questions up till now, because the ones that I had were already answered. But I really just wanted to say that I thought that the presentation to this point is targeted and thorough and very specific, and I really have learned a lot. So I think you've covered the bases, and I love the part about the common message and getting it all the way down the pike, because that's often one of the complaints we hear. But, and I love the Nearpod thing and the collaboration part. So I really want to thank you guys for your hard work and for getting that word all the way down to all the teachers so they can help the kids in this challenging time. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher, and I want to ditto what she has said too, because I'm really excited about this, because this looks like this is something that the kids will really be engaged with, because I know I could have fallen asleep when I was watching some of that. So this is great. So thank you so much for doing this.
We're realists. We're realists.
It's
We
good.
recognize that.
Me too.
That's why we went to work on trying to find a tool that would help in kids. So, but now let's get into what you really want to know. So how did our kids do? We talked about the systems that we put in place, the layers of support. Now we're going to talk about how did we monitor our progress, and then ultimately, what happened?
So we're going to dive in and we're going to talk a little bit about formative and summative data and our ongoing process to evaluate data. We know that it's really important, like with anything else, plan, do, study, act, that we need to keep this cycle going. So every year we start with that baseline, and we're going to look at that baseline data to see where are we right now. But then we also have our formative assessments, which our formative assessments are internal. We take them twice a quarter, and those are our in-between checks for every progress monitoring piece that we have. And those three pieces are what all lead up to our summative assessment data. And when we talk about summative assessment, we're really thinking state, FSA, EOCs, that component there. Because at that time when we get the data, we can't do anything different for this school year. We can utilize the data to say, how can we change for next school year, and what does that student need? But for the 1 year, that's it. So while we know this year, as Dr. Spiro talked about, our mindfulness, and that we keep thinking about our students' safety and well-being, our teachers' safety and well-being, and what their needs are, in the back, we also are mindful of, at the moment, the state has still said we are going to have state assessments. And if we have state assessments, they have come out with, if there were school grades, there are a couple of changes that we would see. So what's on the screen, the arrows would be the points that we really want to key into. These are just the changes so that we're all aware, if school grades come out this year, what the differences will be. And the greatest difference that we really have is when it's in terms of learning gains. Since our students didn't take an assessment last year, if the state calculates a learning gain calculation, it would be 2 years previous. The grade levels in which this has the largest impact is our elementary schools. Elementary schools, it's 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, but only 5th grade would really have learning gains. Your 4th graders would be if they were retained. So this piece is just a file folder that we have in the back of our heads that we know could be coming, and we're aware of it as we watch all of our data points there. All of this will be pending legislation. So in legislation, it says that learning gains are calculated only 1 year, so we are looking that it would be back to. So for any of those changes on the previous slide to even happen, that takes a legislation. Now we know it's part of our legislative priorities that you all are bringing forth, so we appreciate that greatly. But we are mindful in the back of our heads, if it doesn't go that way, what does that mean for us as a district? So with the tools that we can control, though, all of those formative assessments that we have control over, we've talked to you a lot about them. Those are our iReady. That is STAR. Those are our progress monitoring tools that we have for ELA and mathematics. But we also know it's really important to be monitoring our progress in science and social studies as well. How are they doing? So in science and social studies, we have progress monitoring that we give once a quarter as well. So for ELA and mathematics, it's adaptive and predictive. So that's the tool. iReady and STAR is adaptive and predictive. But for science and social studies, it's a cumulative test. So it's comprehensive of what the students should be learning all year long. So when teachers look at that report, we don't expect them to know everything off the bat because it's what they're going to learn throughout the course of the year. In addition to the formatives and the progress monitoring, in iReady, when we talk about partnerships, there's a weekly report that gets sent from iReady to us as a district that both Bethany and Lori then look at and send right back out to our K-8 schools. So it's a quick way for schools to see, are students meeting their minutes requirement, but more importantly, how are they doing with their lessons passed? And that's an ongoing piece that happens every week. And then as we talk about interventions that we do know that we have students that are in reading programs to help provide that additional scaffolding to get them up to grade level standards, and we have benchmarks assessments there. So these are all of our assessment tools that we utilize to drive instruction. So before we get into the data piece, it's really important to note that when we talk about STAR and we talk about iReady, the way we look at that data is a little differently. So you heard Dr. Quisenberry mention earlier, most of our elementary schools and all of our middle schools have transitioned over to iReady. So that's this bottom graph right here. However, we have a couple elementary schools on STAR, and all of our high schools are on STAR. So before we jump out and look at the data, it's really important to understand how we monitor. So for STAR, a student always has a target that they're looking to meet. Each time we take it, we're looking for them to be at or around the 50th percentile rank. And that target is always there for them. So then when they take the FSA, they have one target. Now with iReady though, we base it on where we want them to be at the spring. So if you look at this graph on the end, and I love the way Lori describes it, because in my mind, I'm a math person, I'm a numbers person, but Lori brings me back down sometimes. She equates it to a swimming pool, a lap pool. So with iReady, you're making it all the way across. And with STAR, you've got this checkpoint each time that we're there. So big question, why don't we look at the two the same? Well, we've moved over to iReady, and we know that iReady is being very successful with our students. When you set a goal with a student, it's much easier for them to see that end part, when they're coloring it up, when they see that final number. It's really hard to explain sometimes that, yeah, I know you made it this far, but you didn't make it quite as far next time. So we moved to this system. So as we're transferring over our systems and finding things that work a little bit better for us in Lee County, it also has caused us to think differently on how we report our data. So just so you know that, so when we jump out, you'll understand what we're looking at.
Just to add to that too, another piece that we're really working on for our mindset with our teachers is what I said earlier, where it is data for instruction, where you're not looking at your diagnostic and you're saying this student is a 342, so they're a level 1, okay. What does that mean? What do I do? Where you're more looking at this student scored here on this standard and I need to provide them support with this, or they scored here on this standard and I need to provide them enrichment because they're already above grade level, and having those conversations with students so that they're not just working on an arbitrary number. They understand, I know this many letter names and I need to know this many more, and they're working on those specific standards and they understand what their goals are instead of it just being an arbitrary number. So we wanted to be able to show you We had a data meeting with iReady a few weeks back, and they gave us some really interesting comparison data. I can send the entire presentation to Cindy if you would like to see it broken down by grade levels, because they broke it down by each individual grade level, and they also broke it down by face-to-face versus our students that are working in a virtual model. But we thought that this particular graph, as well as the next one, was important. So if you look where you see that it says district, that represents our entire district. So that is our students that are working in Lee Virtual School, Lee Home Connect, and face-to-face. Where it just says school, in school, they pulled out only our face-to-face students, because we really wanted to see how our virtual students were performing in our diagnostics versus our face-to-face students. You can see that 33% of our in-school students came in, because remember that data point that Candace was talking about, if they score on grade level on their baseline, that means they have already mastered most of or all of the standards for the grade level they're starting. So it's the end goal. So they're already coming in to that grade level in a good spot or above grade level. So 33% of our students that are in school performed at that point, compared to 35% if you pull in our virtual school students. The state of Florida was at 31%. And then fall of last year, from a national norm, iReady is a national program. So they provided where nationally our fall scores were in 18-19 was at 32%. So it's really pretty close to each other. Our students are performing about the same as the state of Florida, and pretty much about the same, a little bit higher than nationally from last school year, and this is in reading. So then you see the same data for math. Math, they talk to us a lot about that nationally is where we're really seeing a hit, and especially in our lower grade levels. So in kindergarten and first grade, we're really seeing the need for some interventions. Our kindergarten students missed the fourth quarter of pre-K, which is where a lot of that number sense is built. And then our first grade students missed fourth quarter of kindergarten, which is where addition and subtraction and some of those basic skills are built on. And so we're seeing a bigger drop in those grade levels. In school, for math, we're at 17% came in at a good spot. For the entire district, we were at 20, but the whole state of Florida was only at 18. And then nationally last year was at 27. So that's where you really see a big difference between the beginning of last year till now. But again, when we compare ourselves to the state of Florida, we're pretty much right there.
I have a real quick question. Why are the numbers different on the math and the reading, like for in-district and in-school? Shouldn't they be the same? Are they the same students?
And if some of those students did not complete their diagnostic within the window.
And remember that there will be more ELA students, because in middle school, our advanced math students are probably taking algebra, which is STAR. So all of those students would not be captured in that number.
I was like, where'd the kids go? Ms. Gittens.
Okay, so I'm looking at the math one right now. First off, it starts 18-19. Do we have any data earlier than that?
I don't have it. I can ask iReady for it.
Yeah, I'd kind of like to see, I mean, even if we just had the national and the Florida, if we don't have our own.
Remember, we didn't use, only a small percentage of our schools were using iReady.
Right, used iReady.
It's the first we really have the bulk of our students, our schools using it.
So maybe looking at the national and historic, so we can at least see. The thing that's concerning to me, because this directly relates to achievement gap, and when you look at the data for achievement gap 10 years back, it's not going anywhere.
And we're going over that in
just a little bit, and then it goes back. There has not been anything, which is just phenomenal to me with all the educational minds and brains that we have, that there has not been someone to figure out how to move that needle. And yet we just keep coasting, along. So even with all the new innovations and everything, why isn't the needle, moving? So anyway, that's right.
Ms. Vaughn?
Yeah, when y'all first started talking about iReady and comparing it with STAR, you said that you overall found that iReady was much more effective with our students. You also mentioned that some of our schools are still using STAR. Why is that if iReady has been determined by the district as being preferable?
So moving into next school year, based on our data, it is our hope that we will go district-wide. Up till this point, for elementary, we presented it as a pilot and continued to onboard additional schools each year so that we could ensure that we had, that number one, we were able to support all of the schools because it's a big shift, it's a big implementation, but also there's a big piece in the willing, right? Whenever it's this big of an initiative, it really helps if the schools and the teachers are on board because it is a lot of professional development to be able to implement it effectively. It's not just a program that you stick the kids on or that takes an assessment. It's a program that really takes the teacher implementing those instructional strategies into their classroom. So that's why we moved a little slower in elementary. Of the 6 schools that have not come on board, 4 of them are using the toolbox and other pieces of the program. So
Okay, so for those 6 schools, we didn't find effective encouragement, so to speak, to get them on board?
remember,
They'll be 100% by next year. So we were,
pandemic year too. So.
Do I see a prod in your hand?
just wrong eye contact, that's all.
I am just big on consistency.
We are as well. And so,
And to me, if this is clearly the better program, and I understand what you're saying about getting people on board, but, when I was teaching, people didn't always ask me, hey, Ms. Vaughn, are you on board with this? It was more like, we're doing this. And so...
And we were trying to avoid the top-down management approach, and that we really were because we did want them to see the results of those schools that were doing it and understand what's the commitment to become an iReady school, because when Dr. Quisenberry talks about the professional development part, it's heavy, but once they get through that piece, it does take off of the teachers, and it becomes a real valuable tool. So hence why those last 6 that were left, 4 of them have begun to use the tools, and we're just left with the 2 that be on board next year.
Who might those
Colleagues.
Can you tell us, or is that going to...
Dr. Atkins, did you want to say something?
Well, no, just to say that one of the things that I would say is that their colleagues and the teachers that are at these iReady schools and the assistant principals and principals at these iReady schools really are some of the biggest cheerleaders. So it made our job in terms of moving toward that platform much, much easier by using that pilot system first.
And remember, in elementary, the teachers teach everything. So when you're asking an elementary teacher to take on initiatives such as this, they don't just have to learn one subject, they have to learn all the subjects. So they're learning how to implement iReady in ELA and in math, at the same time. So it really is a big undertaking.
Yeah, just like the other schools that went on board did.
Yes. So now we were going to take you just into the... Sure.
Ms. Fisher, real quick, do you have any comments?
No, nothing else. Just thank you for this. This has been very informative.
Thank you. I just want to make sure I don't forget.
I understand. And so now the team's going to take you into the dashboard where we're going to really look now at some of the nuances in the data as well. And so I believe, Candace, you're going to be starting.
Sure am. So what you see on your screen here, this is our new data dashboard that came out of research and accountability. They were really working with our schools on how can we visualize the data and have the data quickly at our hands. So as we pulled it up, this is everything, but we are going to look specifically and we're going to start at ELA, because when we think about English language, that's really where we start and take a look at it. So we're going to filter in what most of our schools do is we have the option to look at a school grade group, so students who were with us at survey 2. So we look at all of our students and how are all students doing, and how are the students doing specifically that have been with us from the start of the school year, and we're here at survey 2 as well. This is that group where we said if we're thinking about that file folder in the back, if we have school grades, those students. So we have a mechanism to look at all students, and we have a mechanism to look at specific students as well. So when we're here, this is our proficiency data for English. And the number that you guys want to look down at is our total for quarter 1. That was when we took our progress monitoring, either iReady or STAR, and we are sitting at 48% proficient. And how does that compare to where we were at this point last year? So at quarter 1 last year, we were at roughly 42%. So that's that comparison number that we see there. Now, a really good question, though, came up earlier of, well, how are we doing where they started? So our schools have the ability to look at this data in a multiple capacity. So we're actually going to go in and look just at elementary for a second because it's easier to digest that way. And then this will be an area where we open it up to really take questions and look at specific data. As we know, ELL has come up and closing the gap in our students with disabilities. So how are they doing? So if we take just our elementary school, so now we're down to just a few lines here, we can look, and this prior year is the prior data set that we have on our students. So for 5th grade, when we talked about earlier, 5th grade has an FSA score from 2 years ago. Our 5th grade students came into us at 61% proficient. Right now, they're showing at 42% proficient. But why is that so important? It's that graph that we showed you earlier. Those are the students who have already met their spring target. So 42% of our 5th graders have already reached where we would predict them to be for spring. So as we're closing that gap and looking at where they're at. So we expect each time we take this data point that we see the graph increase. And that's why you can see that with the iReady. That's the other reason why when we talk about setting a spring target, it's you can see it growing each time. In comparison to that, when we look at high school, because high school utilizes STAR, and unfortunately, Ms. Vaughn, iReady doesn't have high school, so we will continue to utilize our STAR and our tracking mechanisms. But when we look at a high school data point, in 9th grade, 49% of our kids came in proficient. Right now, with the target, right where it would be, is 42% are proficient as today. We also need that to increase, but if you think about Lori's swimming pool analogy, that is right where they were at. So right now in 9th grade, we are actually down 7%. So that's work we're going in to do and saying, okay, our interventions that we have in place, how do we engage? How do we look at our rotations and our small groups? What additional supports do we need for our students? Because right now we're looking like we're down some. So it's important as we talk about it and we talk about K-8 and iReady, that data measure looks a little different there. And so I'll flip back over now to middle school so you can see where our middle schools are at. And here you can see that group, and as we presented on that to you guys at the last board meeting, our middle schools really, and Lori had talked to you all a little bit about it, in ELA, where they came in at for 6, 7, and 8 as a total of 52% proficient, and right now we're sitting at 51% proficient, which compared to last year, middle school at this time was at 43% proficient. Our middle school as a K-12 system is really bringing us along that we're seeing there. And Lori had really attributed some of those pieces to some of that work in the summer and what we were able to do. So we'll go back and let me clear this for just a second and let's take a look at our English language learners, because English language learners, we know there were a lot of questions there. So we're still going to stay within ELA, and now we are going to look at just our LY students. And how are our LY students doing? Right now, our LY students on that quarter one data point, they are at 8.1% proficient. So that's where we are at this point in time. Last year, for our ELL students, those showing proficient, we were at 7.5%. So we can kind of see with our groups, this is all. And now if I go to just the group of students who, if the state continues to have school grade, we drop to 6.9%. So you can see there with our students compared to last year, we did take a little bit of a drop with our English language learners. And that's when we think about those layered supports, those additional supports that we've put in place, we're hoping to see this increase over time. So that's for our English language learners for ELA. We can do the same thing, so our schools have the same ability to do the same thing for ethnicity. So when we talk about how are we monitoring with our subgroups, how do we know how they're doing? We can filter here. We can also filter for our students with disabilities. So we can look at individualized disabilities, or we can pull them all together. So I'm going to stop there, though, and we want to put it back to you guys for additional questions and things that you may want to look at. Otherwise, as I'm sure you can tell, I could spend all day in here with you all sharing the many filters that schools have the ability. But at that high level, when we look at our ELA, and how we're doing right now, just kind of like what Bethany shared with the reports from iReady, we're trending down a little bit, but not as far off, and it's holding true to what we're seeing across both the state and nationally.
Great, thank you so much. Ms. Patrica?
What percentage, and you probably don't have this information now, if you can just send it to me, or send it to us, please. What percentage of ELLs are in Lee Virtual or Lee Home Connect, and how do they compare to their face-to-face peers, please?
Is Ms. Evelyn here? Who answers?
We'll get that information for you.
One of the things that you might want to tell the board, I know that Lori's been looking at this, as probably all of you, but discussing how the percentage of ELL students in our district continues to increase.
Yeah, and looking at our trend data over the last 5 years, we're on track to double. So we're increasing about 1.2%. And then of those, you should also be aware that with an influx of students into our district, not just ELL, that our 5-year trend shows that only 37% of students who come to our district and take the test are proficient in ELA and about 41% in math. So when you think about where we start, we always start in the hole. Because we have the new students and we bring them up. So that also, teachers work really hard. You know, that's what that tells me. So that, keeping that in mind.
Oh, thank you.
I think we continue to be, if not the fastest, one of the fastest growing districts in the state of Florida in terms of this particular student population. I know that has been a steady trend for at least 5 years.
Ms. Gittens?
I know you kind of hid the bottom of the page. Is that because you weren't ready for us to see that? Okay, then I'll hold my question.
You have we can look on a specific area that
I'm
interests
sorry. I thought we were at the question.
you. Yes.
No. I mean, I was just looking at the bottom of that and wondering, like, when you click the areas up top, does that change that at the bottom as well?
Yes, so the bottom part is the proficiency piece there. So that quarter one proficiency, depending upon the filters that I have set, it gives a breakdown by the grade level. So right now, since we are looking at all of our students in 3rd through 10th grade for ELA, at the bottom, now we look at the proficiency. So where are those kids coming in? And I'm still on LY, I believe. So I'm still on LY as well, looking at these numbers are small, how they break apart across the individual grade levels. So of our LY students, because we're still filtered on LY, and those students who are proficient, we've got 55 students in 8th grade who are proficient. So this is just a visualization for the school schools and administrators to see where they at. So if you have one grade level contributing to a larger proficiency than another. Again, still with proficiency down here, and we're still on our LY students. Now it breaks down our LY students by their ethnicity. So we see of our proficient students, how does that break apart in their ethnicity? This next graph is based upon their instructional model. So we can see our home connect and our face-to-face, and this is what their instructional model was at Q1 and their instructional model at Q2. So we know we made a larger shift to our students coming back face-to-face. We obviously don't have anything for instructional model in Q3 or 4 since we're not there. And then if any of these students also are students with disabilities, so they also have another piece here. And then for our schools, and I won't click over to the tab at the moment because you are seeing real live data, is our schools then can quickly go over here to this student list and see the names of those individuals. So when we talk about grouping students and trying to take something off of our schools' plates, they don't have to go to another system to grab this data. They can go directly here and see who are those students. This list is always filtered by whatever we have here.
So one quick question on that student ethnicity. Black, does that include islanders as well, like Haitian, et cetera?
It is based upon however the family filled out their form. So it is the Pacific Islander, I believe, is an I.
Yeah, no, I see that here, but where would Creole and Haitian be? Because there's white, Hispanic, black. I guess that's mixed.
Yep, so it's however the family is identified based upon that student enrollment form. This is what ethnicity is being captured on the student enrollment form and is in our mainframe system. So however the family identified at that point in time, that's where the students are being captured into the group.
So we don't, okay, so we don't differentiate blackness.
Unless Ryan, do you want to talk a little bit about the categories that we can?
Because it's not, I mean, there's nothing else
We're not in
here.
the, I messed up because we were not in the question part.
Oh, sorry, okay.
But Ryan, because Ryan was one of the wonderful creators of this tool.
Thank you.
These are the categories that are defined by the state. So it's your white, Hispanic, black, non-Hispanic, multiracial, Asian, and then your Pacific Islander, as well as American Indian. So those are all grouped together, Native American, sorry, grouped together. So those are the state mandated categories. We try to use all of the state's definitions when we are plugging these in. That includes the exceptionalities, our LY categories, so LY, LA, LF, so that it's consistent across everything that we use.
But if we wanted to, we could extract and break down one of those categories.
Yes. We can absolutely look at that.
Okay, thank you.
Candace can do anything. Just kidding. Sorry, can you continue to the question part?
Any group, any subject area specifically you'd like to see, any category, because we'd be happy to walk you through those as well before we move on. Just want to make sure we're meeting your needs, which is why we took a moment to pause. And if there was an area that is of particular focus for you, we want to be able to share that with you and then answer any of the questions you had. Okay, well, thank you. So then, as we move on. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about our next action. So today starts actually week 5 of quarter number 2 of the school year. And so these are the numbers of students in their current instructional learning modality as of November 20th. And so you can see right now we had 68% of our students at face-to-face, 27% Lee Home Connect, and of course 5% Lee Virtual School. We know with the emergency order, obviously we're going to have another change in what those numbers look like. And so I want you to know that we monitor them on an ongoing, regular basis, but with the emergency order certainly is going to change that. So let's talk now some specifics about what are some of our next action steps. Well, certainly our goal continues to be in support of Envision 2030 to become an A school district. Now, how are we going to do that? We're going to continue to do that by using the current data-driven systems that we shared with you today. We're going to continue to use the progress monitoring tools, our formative assessments, and ultimately, of course, at the end, using our summative data to drive part of our continuous improvement processes. Our schools have a PLC instructional plan that is very detailed. They are working with their executive directors, and it says inside of our school, here's what our data looks like. Here are the interventions that we're providing our students during the school day. There are very specific strategies per school that the executive directors are working on with principals. We're going to have, when we come back, we're having winter data chats with our schools, because at this point we'll be almost halfway through the year, where we're going to get a chance to talk with our school principals, have them really take a deep dive in their data with those those instructional plans I talked about, and have the schools clearly articulate to all of us, this is what we're doing between now and the end of the year to meet the needs of our individual students. It's very personal, and it means that it's personal, that it's specific to every school with the students that are sitting in front of them. And certainly our schools have turned in their school improvement plans that are tied directly to Envision 2030. That way we have that clear alignment all the way through the organization. We're also going to continue with our targeted instructional support. And so we're going to continue to have the heavy focus on the interventions by trying to close those gaps that Ms. Giddens was talking about earlier. That continues to be a focus of all the work that we do all the way through. We're going to have our tiered support from the district. Our district is committed to supporting our school. Hopefully that was captured in what you heard here today, that we are driven to have a laser-like focus on helping our schools with tiered support on meeting their individual needs. Of course, we're going to continue with our leading and learning teams, and as we do that targeted instructional support, that also overlays, again, those instructional plans that are specific to each school. We're also going to continue with our layered supports, and again, layered supports talk about interventions that I talked about previously with targeted instructional support. I could not underscore enough how much focus we're putting around social emotional support of our students. That continues to be a heavy focus, and truthfully, I really believe after all this is said and done with the pandemic, I really feel like that will continue to be a focus for our students, that we're going to make sure that we have a systemic approach to making sure that the social emotional needs of our students are met. And then, of course, we're going to have those continued supports for our ELL students and our ESC students, because as the data shows, our students certainly are not making the gains in the areas of especially ELL and ESC that we really want them to have. And of course, we need to have those targeted supports for them. And then finally, we're going to be building capacity, those systems we've been talking about all day today. We're going to be continuing to do that through mentoring and monitoring of the data with what we shared with you today. We are using a book study that we're using with all of our leaders around Marzano's. It's called High Reliability Schools. It's about a systemic approach within a school district, how you take processes in a district and make those replicable all the way through the system. And we've begun that process with our principals. We would have loved to have been further down the road with this high reliability schools, but of course, COVID put a little bit of a turn on that, and so we slowed that down a little bit, but that continues to be a focus for us, having those systems. And then us, as our teams, we are going to deepen our approach in the area of literacy teams. Strong believers in literacy across the content areas. Really wanted to make sure we have our literacy teams in schools having a focus around literacy, because ultimately at the end of the day, the research will show you that support in literacy does have a positive impact on student achievement in all areas. And so we are going to shine a light on literacy inside of our schools, and by doing all of the pieces that you see up there on your screen. This is part of the everyday work that we do. I also know on Friday you were also sent the spring plan that we're sending up to DOE in response to everybody coming back to schools for those students that are not making adequate progress. And in that plan, a lot of what we talked about today, the interventions, the targeted supports, the time during the day, all of that is mentioned in that plan. And so if you had a chance to read that, hopefully that reiterates some of the work that we are doing. So that is objective 1 for Envision 2030. And I think we were close to hitting our time.
Yes, very close, thank you. Actually, we have 8 minutes.
There you go. So 8 minutes for just any
Good.
general questions
We are
you may
good.
have.
Ms. Patrica.
This is not my criticism. This is a criticism that I hear from my colleagues across the state. How do you respond to the criticism that iReady is simply teaching to the test?
So, and I'm going to talk about that first, Bethany, and then I'll let you jump in as well. And it's also it's also about the implementation, and that's why we did not want to just mandate using iReady to every school in the beginning, because we needed for them to understand why iReady is a tool to help students with intervention support, and what it takes to actually implement iReady in a school, so that it's not just, it is, as Bethany talked about, it is used to drive instruction, and it's a work of the PLC as well. And so it's about creating those systems in the schools. So schools need to understand the why before we just have every school use it. And that's one of the reasons we did a slower implementation of that. And Bethany, I'll let you talk a little bit about that.
First, I want to make sure everyone understands that it's a resource. Yes. So it's not our core program. In many districts, it's their core program. They took out their core math or their core ELA, and they simply utilize iReady, and that is not what we did. We have a core and an intervention program, and this is a supplemental resource for our teachers. But just as Dr. Spiro said, and I said earlier, that it's for instruction, so reiterating that mindset of that the important piece and the way that it is utilized effectively with our students is by digging in to each individual student, finding what they need, and then iReady supplies those resources. So it's not just putting them on the computer, which is where I hear the negative feedback as well, is if the student is on a computer for 2-3 hours just working through a student learning path, that's not the intention. We actually track our students that have more than 45 minutes, and we have those conversations with the principals, assistant principals, and the teachers and the PLCs, because anything over 45 minutes is not effective, and they shouldn't be on the program that long. It really should be where the teachers are utilizing those other resources for small group, one-on-one instruction. Another piece that kind of goes towards teaching to the test, though, is iReady is very rigorous. Yes. And that's very eye-opening for our teachers. I know that this year, especially, Lori kind of went through it last year for fourth quarter when they implemented it. She got a lot of pushback from the middle school teachers of our kids can't do this is too hard. Well, no, it's to the standard of the grade level. And so in elementary, I've really gotten that in the beginning of the school year with our new iReady schools, especially in our primary, because it is to the rigor of the standard. And so we get a lot of pushback on, our students can't do this, our students aren't ready for this. No, we need to support our students so that we are ensuring that our instruction is also to the rigor of the standard. So it really helps with that piece as well.
Hence the monitoring piece. We talked about one of the building blocks that we showed up. There was the mentoring and monitoring, hence the important part of us at the district monitoring that as well and making sure we're doing what's right for kids.
Ms. Patrica, go ahead.
I heard you say several times that iReady is so much better than STAR. Upon what are we relying to draw that conclusion, other than teachers love it once they learn it? And then my final question is iReady, have you heard whether they're coming out with the ability to administer it in high school?
Candace asks them that every day.
Every time we meet, I say, where's my algebra program? Where's my algebra program? Because from what Bethany said, being built on the standards, mathematics, as we can see, was one of our areas of opportunity. Our other platform is skill-based. Skills are very important. It's important to know the basic addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, but our students are not assessed, unfortunately, on that. So iReady being built on those standards really helps the rigor. How do we know it's better, though? One of the things we did at the very first year after elementary had those 20 iReady pilots is we compared how did our students do who used iReady compared to our schools who utilized STAR. Our highest achieving students, 4s and 5s, maintained their 4s and 5s. They were not slipping backwards. So a lot of the times what we see in our district data is we would make gains with our 1s and 2s moving up to 3s, but we would lose some of our 4s and 5s going backwards. So it kept our highs and it pushed them higher to make that growth that was there. And it also helped our students who were right on the edge of 2s and 3s moving up. Now our students who are achievement level 1s, they still need additional interventions, which is why we have all of the other interventions in place, because they need more than just that. But we saw overall our students showed better growth and held their achievement level better with those 20 schools. Now last year, obviously, we couldn't look at that same data set because we didn't have a state assessment to say how did they do. This year, we'll be able to look at the data again, though, and see how are our students doing.
Thank you.
Did that answer your question? Okay, thank you. Ms. Gittens?
Okay, I'm going to give you guys a cheer, first of all, because I'm one of the cheerleaders for iReady, thanks to him, right? But iReady, one of the things, and I would like to suggest that maybe the other board members that are not as familiar with it as I am, to maybe have an opportunity to play with it, to see what it looks like. One of the things that I found with the students, it was very engaging. There's a lot of, stuff that gets their attention and they're very engaged in it, which actually helps the teachers because the students are more engaged. I mean, you're basically just, walking around and monitoring and helping where you need to. And it's very easy for tracking the data because it's all right there and, everything you need is at your fingertips. So I'm the cheerleader for that. And I had done a whole plethora of questions regarding the spring 2021 education plan, and you've answered them all. Thank you very much.
We were hoping to weave those into the presentation so we can answer the questions
and you
would
did.
have.
You hit them all.
So we appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
Ms. Fisher, do you have any questions or comments? Ms. Fisher?
Sorry, I was trying to unmute.
That's okay.
No, I have no further questions, and my own comments again, and thank you very much for a tremendous, comprehensive, and thought-provoking presentation. Stay well, everyone.
Thank you. Ms. Vaughn?
Are we using longer readings, like starting 3rd, 4th grade chapter books? And I know for a while the long readings were kind of they weren't being used. How does that work in with the iReady? Is it can it be part of the program in some way? I know because iReady's little short things, right?
The AR.
It does have built-in, it's called close reading components, so I can speak for personal experience. When my son was in 5th grade and he was at a school that was utilizing iReady, he would get very frustrated and try to skip it because they were the long, and we train teachers and schools on, because they monitor their lessons that they've completed and passed, and so we train them on, if you see a student that is in the lesson, for a longer period of time, please check to make sure it's not a close reading, because close reading is going to take them 45 minutes or longer.
I didn't say it right. Like novels, long plays, that sort of thing.
So those aren't in iReady, but they're in their core curriculum. Yes.
They are in the core curriculum.
Yes.
So kids are having experience with that. And perhaps, I don't know, does iReady make up all their own pieces, or are they pulling from famous poetry, novels, plays, and that? Are they coming from that source, or are they creating their own pieces?
Both, but they do use some from the public domain, so they do have some familiar pieces as well.
Okay, yeah, so like you could have, if you're reading a particular book, it may happen that a close reading from that book. Okay, just curious, thank you.
And isn't that part?
Excellent presentation, by the way, very detailed.
That's part of the AR too. Your AR books also have those types of books.
Are we still doing AR?
We'll do AR in elementary,
Yeah.
I think in some middle schools as well.
We still have that going on.
Yeah.
Ms. Giovanelli?
So, it is excellent. I would love the opportunity to have the iReady so that I could play on it. I don't know how that works, so give me something to do like I need. But,
Homework over winter break.
An elementary,
but seriously.
adopt an elementary school.
Information for the board, and we'll make sure we send it in the update so you can see some of the information you want, and then an opportunity maybe to access the resources so you can play around in there too.
That'd be awesome. Thank you. So one of my concerns, and no one really mentioned the kind of the elephant in the room. What resources are we putting out there for all these students that are getting quarantined for COVID? And because we know what we did last year before quarantine, and now we have quarantine, and I know we haven't changed our vision, you know what I mean? So, but what are our extra resources? Because my concern is the number of students that, have we identified maybe the demographics of these students, areas that are getting the quarantine, and then I know we've got a class that's out quarantined. So, I mean, how is that going to affect what your plan is? So,
that's a great question. It's not really the elephant in the room.
I'm really concerned over that. And
it's a question we talk about all the time. So for us, it's a common question. So we always talk about how do we meet the needs of the kids who are Lee Home Connect? How can we get resources in teachers' hands as well? So, that's one of the reasons we came up with Nearpod. As Nearpod as one of the tools for kids to use, but also every teacher being trained in Google Classroom so that kids had access to work if they were not available to access that information because a teacher was quarantined or they're quarantined, they would still have access to it. Is it the same as face-to-face instruction with that teacher? No, we understand that, but we continue to and our team out here as well. I think about Evelyn when I meet with her, Dr. Rivera when I do her one-on-ones meeting with her. We talk all the time about her team zooming in to Lee Home Connect classrooms. Same thing with Teresa Bowen with her ESC team zooming in. So I know from our end, we're zooming into classes where we can help provide push-in support for teachers and classes that need it. But is there still work in that area that needs to be done? Absolutely. We continue to try and figure out ways to meet kids who aren't being met. And that's important for us because we know that we might be losing some kids that we need to grab a hold of. And that really worries us because we're worried about the kids who may be socially isolated at home as well, socially isolated and maybe in a classroom because maybe their Lee Home Connect isn't as engaging as it would be, and what's happening to those students. And that's where Jessica and Duncan and her team they've been doing home visits for families that have been identified as well to making sure that kids have a connection with an adult. So yes, it's a concern, and we continue to look at it to try to find remedy ways to get kids connected. And I don't know if anybody else wanted to add on to that.
We do have schools as well that have teachers scheduled into a Zoom lab. And so this teacher, every period, they have a Zoom lab. So kids that are at home, like quarantine or whatever, and they may be struggling in math or something like that, they can log on to the Zoom lab, and there's a certified teacher there to assist them with their work.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you for that, because I think we need to, I wanted to identify the demographics, but I know even like at Fort Myers High School, we've got kids that got quarantined, they come back and they get quarantined again, and that demographic is not what our normal, you know what I mean, where we're having to give extra resources to. So I know that COVID is going to affect all over the district, but I'd love to know how are we identifying those different areas that may need more resources than others. So
we can circle back with you on that one. Got to go to work on that one.
But thank you. I love everything that y'all do because I can see a lot of work put into it. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to say too, I thought this was great. And also FSBA, there was a thing for iReady on there, so you can go back there. You have 30 days to go back and look at it, and you can play around with it, so that you know. Ms. Morgan, did you have any comments or say anything?
No, I'm very grateful for the presentation. I thought it went well. You met my expectations. Thank you very much. I learned a lot.
Thank you.
So thank you very much, and thank you all who came to assist you.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Okay. Yes, I'm sorry, Ms. Dupree Bruno?
Yeah, board members, I just want you to know that there is a data sharing consent form that came through from the Department of Education. They will be pulling data from iReady from January 31st, 2020 January 1st, 2020 up through January 31st, 2022, 3 times a year to review the data.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask if we could have a 5-minute break and return, if that's okay? Thank you.
So much better. Thank you.
7:12. I'm sorry, 7:12, 3:12.
I'll see you in the morning. No, you
Rephrase.
already said it now.
Your sandwich is on your are they nails done? Tips? No, so they're not decals, they're glue on nails? Those. Really? Oh. Where'd you get them? Wow, okay. To know.
So I think we are
Hide back in the corner there.
We're good?
ready.
me?
He is getting in contact with Ms. Fisher. She should be on momentarily.
Ms. Fisher, are you on?
Oh, Rita,
I'm
okay.
talking about Rita, so she's always sits over there.
Okay, great. Good that we're glad to have you back. We're going to go ahead and begin with our second half of the agenda review. So, Dr. Atkins.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. The agenda review for tomorrow evening's agenda, we will start with the questions. I think you have them. The first question that we have is G1, approval of personnel recommendations general. A question from Ms. Giovanelli, administrative and certificated agenda. Making East Zone changes in the middle of the school year is a wise move to make all changes to the East Zone in the middle of a pandemic when students need stability and consistency. So I know Dr. Pruitt is here to answer that question. Let me just go through, maybe we can.
I'm sorry, Dr. Atkins. Ms. Fisher, could you please mute yourself? Thank you.
Then just some follow-up to that. Why are deans of student discipline being demoted to teachers at Lehigh Senior? Were these positions not needed? Are you making similar changes at other high schools or just Lehigh Senior? And what does this do to their contract and salary? And does this affect the school's budget? Dr. Pruitt.
So I didn't know if on the East Zone question that was specific to the assistant principals or in general, but relative to the assistant principal moves, I mean, we never are intentionally doing anything to disrupt schools in the East Zone especially, but sometimes we have some complicated personnel matters that require us to make some changes and move people around, and so that's what you're seeing there on this particular board agenda item. Relative to the dean position is an instructional position. It is equal to it is a teacher position. It just it's in the instructional salary schedule. So if somebody goes from being a dean to a teacher or a teacher to a dean, it's the same contractual number of days, the same salary schedule, same base pay, no changes in that. Relative to how the deans are allocated, that's a school decision. Schools are given their file and they make use of their DRAs, and if they have a need for a dean position, then they request it and can do so as long as their budget will support it. So in terms of affecting the school's budget, it's the same cost to the school budget. A DRA is equal to a teacher unit, a dean is a teacher unit, so there's no change in the budget. In relative to, I don't know specifically the files of each of the high schools to know. We could certainly get that information, but I didn't have it handy to know exactly how many deans are being utilized at which schools. But we could certainly get you that information.
And there was.
Giovanelli.
The dean positions are not an additional stipend or anything like that, then you're telling?
No, ma'am.
It's equal?
It's equal, right.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
And there was a follow-up question, why so many personnel resignations?
I mean, we're pretty similar to what we were this time last year, except in the teacher units, which when you get in the board update, you see each week teaching unit vacancies that we had this same time that last year. And as if we'd indicated, it is it's an ongoing concern. Relative to why are there so many, the reason code is personal. We use the personal reason code whenever the person does not give us a reason that they are leaving the district. If they tell us they're getting another job, we do the appropriate code. If they tell us they're moving, we put the appropriate code. But sometimes they just say, I quit. And so we put personal reasons. I did provide Ms. Stillwell a copy of all the codes we do use, so we can put that in the board update so the board members can see that. But the personal is like the generic what we use when we don't know why someone's leaving. So I don't know if there's any follow-up questions to that.
I just have one about the position. It was a couple months ago that we approved of, it was an AP, higher level AP position.
The associate principal?
Probably, yes.
Yes.
How many of those do we have at this point?
None at this time.
And where are you with that? Is it just something that's not?
We wanted to have the position available when and if we felt the need to add that particular position. We have had discussions about having that position at a couple of schools based on what was going on within those schools, but haven't had to kind of pull the trigger, if you will, yet. But I definitely see it in the future as a great stepping stone to helping us replace, some of our principals that are going to be retiring in the near future.
Okay, and I have been asked the question by a couple of people that, about applying to be a teacher in our district and kind of how long it takes. I've referred them to the online process, and one lady did that, and then she came here as well, and she hadn't heard anything back, so she was wondering what's the, is there a period of time, or?
Should be immediate, so I would ask that you give me her name and I can follow up on it, because literally they scour those every hour. They're scouring anyone who even clicks an interest in our website.
Right.
We're following up with them. So if there's a
Slip through the
somebody out there, or something, I would definitely want to know that, because like I said, we need teachers, so.
Oh, I know.
Yep.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we had one other question that she may follow up with getting some additional data that says, can we please have a breakdown of personnel data from August to December reflecting?
Yeah, I asked staff to work on that so we can include it in the board update.
Okay, awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Question?
I did have one question, I'm sorry, and I did not send it ahead of time. I was just curious why the removal items from the official property records usually has everything listed, which this time it did not. So are the 63 obsolete items the same? And then the one is beyond repair, which has a price. But
Doctors, I don't know. Yeah, looking for Dr. Desamore's.
she was just right there too. I was just curious because we've always had that here.
Yeah, it says there's 2 PDF attachments, so maybe they're just not there. Maybe they
'Cause I
just
know
didn't get uploaded.
Trying to click on that forever and never. Okay, it's not just my imagination, okay.
Do you want to discuss the other thing, or?
So that was the only question, if they could just,
While we're waiting on that, can I
Attach it.
ask a quick one?
yes, Ms.
On
Gittens.
on the contract,
To Dr. Atkins?
yeah, on the contracts that are on here, like the one for the, what is it, Davis or whomever, these are all just renewal contracts that we have, basically? Okay.
I don't need for her to, if they can just send that, I'd just like to look at that. That would be great. I don't know about anybody else, but I was just curious on that. So are there any other questions? No? Okay, wow, that was fast. Sorry, go ahead, Miss.
It's more of I think of a comment than a question about the agenda. On the agenda, it has someone assigned to do the moment of silence, and I don't know, I just kind of think that's redundant, that the chair or whoever is running the meeting can just say, or else the person doing the pledge.
Yeah.
can just say, now we'll have a moment of silence followed by the pledge, and then they do the pledge. I just don't think it's
We could do that. And then,
necessary to have
so, I know this is-
everybody.
if maybe then we want to change the acknowledgement and share that instead,
Acknowledgement of,
like the character award.
Doesn't matter to me.
doesn't matter. I just thought that was redundant to say, have someone just say, okay, please be quiet.
Designating that and putting that into an agenda every meeting is
Right.
kind of pointless. Like, that's what, them having to figure out whose turn it is when it should be.
So, Ms.
No one's
Dupree
done.
Bruno, what do you, is that,
There's not a problem because I like consensus. If we can just have consensus to make sure that the board is okay, that the person who is doing the Pledge of Allegiance would also lead in the moment of silence.
is everybody good with that? Ms. Fisher?
Yes, fine, thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, thank you. Well, seeing, you have another?
Well, are we going to go around and ask?
Yes, I'm going to do that now.
Okay.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure no one had any other questions for Dr. Atkins. Okay, so good of the order and member comments. Ms. Giovanelli?
I really don't have that much, except that I want to bring back up the attorney job title. We've never had resolution of that. When were we supposed to, is it on the agenda or to discuss? Because there's still confusion on who's on first, what's on second in our legal department.
We'll ask, I know Dr. Pruitt has been working on that, so she can give you an update at this time.
We were going to be bringing to you in January both job descriptions with job title changes, changing chief legal counsel to chief staff attorney, and school board attorney to general counsel.
Is that your recommendation?
I haven't seen anything. I was not aware, so based on what, is presented, then I can make a recommendation to the board. But I believe that's in line with what we have discussed in the past.
Yeah, I did that based on, because you had sent me an email requesting that change, so I did it based on that.
So you'll approve it before we see it then, as it be your recommendation?
Yes.
That's going to come down?
That is Ms. Dupree Bruno does not authorize that, correct?
No, job descriptions go through human resources, so the job descriptions will come out of human resources. However, yeah, we definitely will be sending them to Mr. Williams and to Mr. Dupree Bruno, just in case there's some other change they might want to make to it. So they will be involved in the process before it comes to you guys to vote on, but it comes through human resources.
Thank you. Ms. Vaughn?
Yeah,
You have a question regarding,
You just said Ms. Bruno would be what?
General counsel is what she had requested, so that's what I was.
I'm wondering why we wouldn't include school board with that to make it less confusing to people just looking at the titles.
I defer back then to Ms. Dupree Bruno, because I did it based on that request. Yeah, so.
I'm curious why. Ms. Bruno, did you
I think normally,
omit school board?
I think normally the title is school board attorney and general counsel is what I have seen in most of the other districts. So if that's what, again, I haven't seen what has been drafted or anything like that, so I would want to see that first. But school board attorney should be part of the title, I believe.
100%.
Can I just say, there was discussion before that in other districts, and because the way information comes in, that the chief legal counsel was usually the terminology that was used, and I thought that's what we had agreed upon.
No, there was nothing agreed, I don't believe it, there was
I don't
anything agreed
recall
upon.
any.
And I do believe we need to put, make sure that school board attorney is on there so they know there is the difference of
Yeah.
who is the school board attorney and who is the staff.
Right.
So that even though we're all one, we need that, to make sure that we have that.
Wasn't the discussion.
Again, our process, you know, as Dr. Pruitt had indicated, we were working with Ms. Bruno. We understand that there has been some concern about the titles and some confusion, so in order to address those concerns, Ms. Bruno and Dr. Pruitt have been working together. So always we go back to the shareholders with information prior to we move forward with board approval. Doesn't matter to us. I've had discussions with.
And there's titles all over the place. There's general, I mean,
What
so,
were the two that you stated in the
I'm
beginning?
going to
general counsel, and then,
That's the one that there was a confusion about general counsel. Okay, so making sure that the board attorney was the general counsel. So that, as we understood, was the issue at hand. And then
chief staff attorney.
where that designates Mr. Williams as the chief being aligned with other chiefs, staff attorney designating him as the staff attorney. So, and that as the lead staff attorney. Which organizationally, I think, is in alignment with our organizational structure in terms of the executive team and chief. So chief, staff, attorney, and then if you want it to be school board attorney and general counsel.
Fine.
Again, it doesn't matter to us. We're just hoping to address the concerns that the board had.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I just took out my folder on the research that we did earlier on with that. And yes, it says school board attorney and general counsel. And most of the districts and the communication that has come to me from Florida School Board Attorneys Association was that there was some confusion as to whether, you know, who was our school board attorney and general counsel. So I think that that is exactly what the prescription was: school board attorney and general counsel, and then chief staff attorney.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. That's what I recall as well.
Yeah, I would expect the drafts to be out next week to Mr. Williams and Ms. Dupuy-Bruno. And so, again, whatever.
Thank you, Dr. Pruitt. Ms. Giovanelli, did you have anything else?
Yeah, that's good.
That was it?
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for the healthy
Ms.
conversation.
Patrica. Ms. Fisher, do you have anything?
No, I really don't. I just want to thank everybody for their patience in my absences, and I'm trying to keep up as best I can. And hopefully I will be able to be in full gear again soon.
Miss you. We miss you, Ms. Fisher.
Ms. Gittens?
Okay, I wanted to let you know that tomorrow I will be bringing a motion to reverse our consensus on the invocation process. When the consensus was taken, I think the vote was 4-3, of which I was one of the 4 against it. I have spoken to several people in the community, or they've spoken with me, and I have done some research on it, and my thought process in voting for the moment of silence was to avoid any conflicts of possibly someone standing up and saying something that was maybe offensive or whatever to another group. But in retrospect, that's the First Amendment. So if that's what someone chooses to say, then that is their choice, and there may be a following for what they say as a person doing the invocation. So I do believe that we are not in the schools, so it's not the same. And looking at the research on it, we can have invocation as long as we personally, the elected officials, don't do it. And I have said before that I would, I did like having the different, ministers, pastors, whatever, rabbis and all, to come and do an invocation. So I will bring that up. I'm just letting you know that for a vote tomorrow, unless it's something we can do with a consensus today.
Just bring it tomorrow.
Just do it.
Mr. Pre-Bruno?
Yes, Madam Chair.
We should just bring it tomorrow, correct, for the good of the order?
If the board at this point is not willing to discuss it or enter into consensus on it, it should be brought forward tomorrow.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't know if anyone is.
So does,
I didn't hear that, and I don't understand. I'm sorry, may I ask a question?
Please.
I didn't hear what you said, Attorney Dupree-Bruno, and if it didn't require an action vote the first time around, why would it require anything other than consensus the second time around?
What I said is if the board is not willing to move forward and discuss it today and entertain it as consensus, then would have to be brought in an action vote.
So then my question is anyone willing to discuss it today for a consensus?
do we have a discussion on this? Anyone, please? Ms. Giovanelli?
So I supported the invocations of different religions, so my vote will stay the same. I supported keeping the invocation, so I lost on that vote. So there's where I stand.
Thank you. Ms. Fisher?
I'm in favor of invocations.
Ms. Patrica? I know you were in favor.
I believe that this has been done appropriately. I think that when you're on the winning end of a vote, you can revisit it, and you're on the winning end of the vote, so you can revisit it, and my vote wouldn't change either. I would be in favor of an invocation.
Thank you. Ms. Vaughn?
I go with the moment of silence.
Ms. Morgan?
No. Moment of silence, please.
Okay, and I was still at the moment of silence.
Okay. May we take a consensus
So doing the consensus,
vote?
can we have a consensus? Ms. Fisher?
Yes, invocations.
So that's, we would be reversing it, going back to invocation, which would mean anyone who is on the list may speak. Correct, Mr. Pre-Bruno?
1 second, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, doesn't that also negate what we just,
Yes, yes, I thought
Consensus
about that
on?
afterwards, yes.
why did we do?
Because
That was done before,
You were backwards, Ms.
I was
Gittens.
backwards.
Sorry.
So I just want to make sure that I'm clear.
I know, I'm
Miss-
teasing you.
Go ahead, please.
I just want to make sure that I'm clear on the consensus. It is now 5 in favor of going back to the invocation, is that correct?
No, it's 4.
4? May I please see the consensus again? Because I think
It's 4-3
4 to 3, okay.
in favor of.
Okay, so at this point, I would request the board to instruct myself and staff to create a process to make sure that we are not in violation of any law in terms of who comes and speaks and where these speakers are coming from. I think that's where we were stuck a little bit last time, and I want to make sure that we do that properly so we're not in violation.
And we would also want to know timeline for when to start the process.
Okay.
probably January, the next meeting.
I have a question.
Go ahead, please, Ms. Vaughn.
Okay, I'm just trying to remember what's right here. Had we taken a vote, a person who wanted to reverse, well, in this case, her decision would have to have been on the winning side, right?
And I was.
So does that hold true for consensus, in which case?
And it still was. It was only a consensus vote. It was not an action vote.
Okay.
As long as you, by protocol, as long as you're on the winning side, you can change your vote.
And you were on the, that's right, you were on the
And I
winning
was on the
side.
winning
You kind of
side.
confused me for a
She's
moment.
changing her vote.
Would it be appropriate to, so we don't do this one more time back and forth, to have it as a motion tomorrow?
We can have it as a motion tomorrow. That was, in case the board was not willing to move forward with consensus, that would have been my recommendation, is for a formal motion. So if we do it tomorrow, that will seal the deal.
Yeah, I'd kind of like to see it as a sealed deal, because we're pretty split, with 3-4 and then 4-3, and just so we don't have another change of opinion, it would seal
Okay.
it.
Ms. Dupree, Bruno?
So tomorrow, the board can take a formal vote to accept the consensus, formalize the consensus vote of today.
Okay, thank you. And then from there, we would then instruct you to come up with a list of how, and protocols on how we are going to have these people come and do the prayers?
Yes. So I will work with Ms. McClung again on that particular topic, and we will bring it forth to the board in January. Please allow us time to make sure that we get the process correct that we'll be bringing before the board. So I'm not sure if you will have an invocation at the first board meeting in January. It may be the second board meeting in January.
Okay, thank you. So for tomorrow and January, if we do not have those processes in place, then it will be the person who will be doing the pledge will also be doing the moment of silence. Correct? Because that's what we just said.
Yes.
Thank you.
Except Mary Fisher's doing the, I guess you could do it. Okay.
You still say,
So
be
we'll be-
quiet.
Yeah.
Okay, Ms. Gittens, do you, moving forward, Ms. Gittens, do you have,
Yes, I do have one other thing. We have gone back and forth and back and forth and on for months about our workshop topics. And I know some members talk about that we, need to do our work and finish our work. I feel that we are stymied in doing that by not having a process of our workshops. And we have discussed before having the list and being able to review it and move stuff as necessary. But there are things that have been, pushed around and on this list forever. And I feel that we have lost control of our ability to say what we want to have workshopped, and it's our workshops. So I am asking again to have some type of closure on the topic of how we, what is the list? Where is our list? And Mr.
okay,
Prebrunel has a.
okay, go ahead, please.
I do know that the list is being worked on to be provided to you, and hopefully will be provided to you by this week.
And
I
then
know
what
staff
is
is
the
working on.
process after we receive it?
Okay, if I may, really quick, I know, and I spoke with Jen, so we do have, we are getting together the list. That was a conversation we already had, so everybody will have that. We also have items that we know we have to have done in a timely manner that are dated. So we want to make sure that whatever those dates are for the certain items that we must make sure that we do, we have to make sure those workshops are complied with those. So we're trying to work together to get everything in the order in which we need to do, so that way we can do the work. And take that list and make sure that we look at it. Do we need this right now, or is it gone? So we can look at that to make sure that we need to continue with the certain items that are on the list. So we will be getting that to everybody.
Can we make it a process that, once a month, once every other month or whatever, that we as a governance team, a board, looks at that list and is able to, give input
Ms. Dupree Bruno?
I believe, board members, that in your review of your protocols, you did say that you were going to do that, and one of the workshops each month would be dedicated to something from your list, and you will be provided with that information on a regular basis.
Correct. Thank you.
Say, though, that as, things that have just kind of slid way down and have been on there forever would surface to the top and be in that particular workshop.
Only if that's.
No, what we're going to do, we'll look at those meetings, we will look at those items, and once you have all that, if there's something that you think that has been omitted or slid down and went away somewhere, we'll bring that back, but we need to make sure that we're doing whatever we're working on at that moment. We need to make sure that we are at the same pace with that. So they're not like all over the board on what they're needing to present to us when they really need to be speaking about something else.
No, I understand that. I know when I was chair and I worked with Jen on, there are certain things because of, contracts, et cetera, that have to be in a certain timeline. But I just still think that we need to make it a priority rather than.
And we will, and that was Ms. Morgan had brought that up for us to have that meeting just for that, so we can work over those things.
And when will we schedule that meeting?
We will be scheduling it, it'll be after the first of the year.
Okay.
So we'll be having the two, so we'll have one that will be like this, and then next one will be, so it's probably the middle of January. Because we have December, which is tomorrow, and then we do not have another one till January.
Right.
The list prior to that. I mean, you'll have the list ahead of that.
Right.
So you can take a look at
And
the
we'll
list.
have that before, okay, that's all I was asking. Thank you.
Yeah, no, she's working on it now.
Okay.
She's been working on it. Thank you, Jen, for doing that too. Ms. Gittens, do you have anything else?
I believe that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Vaughn?
I'm going to preface this with, I guess it's especially since COVID, sometimes I lose track of the date. And when I pulled in here this morning, I saw the flag at half-mast, and I thought, oh, who died? And then I looked at the date. So since we've spent a lot of time today talking about history, I just wanted to point out that today is the day, as FDR said, the date which will live in infamy. And it was on this day back in, 1941?
1941.
Yeah.
41, yeah. That over 2,300 people died in that Japanese attack, and our entrance into the Second World War, which really was a huge turning point in the 20th century. And we emerged after the war again, like after the First World War, but after the Second World War, as a very different nation. And so I just wanted to point that out in case there were some people like me who kind of lose track of what date is it, that it is an important date in our history. And other than that, I have nothing else to add.
Thank you. Ms. Morgan?
First of all, I will write up comments from the FSBA workshops. I have not had time. We've had a lot of stuff scheduled, a lot of days scheduled back to back. I will say that I thought it was a fabulous meeting. There wasn't a workshop I attended. Sometimes I would start to attend and I would think, I'm not sure I'm going to get anything out of this. But I'd stay with it, and there was always something I was able to pull out. So I will try to share that with you. I'm not going to guarantee that it'll be this week, but I will share it with you. I am curious about where we are with respect to policy. We have not done anything on policy, probably, since August?
Okay.
I think we need to update according to whatever legislation was passed for the 2020 legislative session. We have 21 coming up. We haven't got a schedule for review of existing policies, and I think as we're talking about scheduling stuff for the coming year, we need to build into our schedule policy updates or policy reviews.
Okay.
So those are my comments.
Thank you, and I know Ms. Dupree Bruno has that on her to-do list, amongst many other things. I just wanted to say the conference that we went to, I felt that was really great, and we did get the scholarship. We did win one scholarship for Lee County, just saying.
That was Debbie.
Was not going to not win. And I also wanted to say I had the opportunity to sit in on the Audit General Report with Dr. Desamore, and I would tell you it was pretty amazing, and there was no findings, so they did a great job. So thank you for that. And just remember, we have to do your ethic trainings. If you haven't done that, we have to make sure that those get done, please, by the 31st. And also, I wanted to compliment Ms. Patrica on the board meeting that we had with FSBA on Friday morning. They gave her kudos. Everybody really was appreciative of the hard work that she has been doing representing the FSBA, and in the end is representing Lee County. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
And don't forget, we have a general meeting which is coming up next week that we'll be voting for all the nominees. So we want to make sure that we are there and participating, please. And that's all I have to say. And Ms. Dupree Bruno, please.
I don't have anything, Madam Chair.
Okay. Oh, I do have one. Congratulations, Dr. Atkins, on your anniversary. Actually, and for you as well, Jen. Congratulations to both of you. 30 years, amazing. Dr. Atkins, do you have anything to share?
Yes, I have some good, what I think you'll find to be good news. First of all, we want to announce two administrators of the year who's our nomination to the state. So these will be representing Lee County. First of all, assistant principal of the year. This year, our assistant principal representing Lee County will be Mr. Forrest Walker.
Oh, great. Oh.
Congratulations to Forrest and Dunbar High School. So he will be representing us at the state level. And so next will be the principal of the year, and that would be Dr. Rob Cooper.
Great.
I didn't hear that.
Rob Cooper.
Cooper.
Great.
Yep, Rob Cooper. So two extraordinary individuals. These guys both work extremely hard for our district, and we are very, very thrilled to be putting their names forward.
And may I ask, how do they, is this something that they win overall?
Well, it puts them into the next level, which is the state of Florida. You know, so they will compete against the state. Actually, come on up, Dr. Savage.
I want to know how we
Dr. Savage could explain this better than me because he is actually a former state principal of the year. So, give you a little bit more
I guess
about.
my question is there something we should be doing to help them win?
I'm telling you. No, well, thank you, and good afternoon. No, there's really nothing you can do to help them at this point, though essentially they're nominated by their own folks, and then they rise to our level. They're voted on here at our level, and then they become district representatives in the larger state. And there's annually, they do it for principal and for an assistant principal. And they used to do it even by levels, but then a few years ago when I had that opportunity, what they do is you're in the statewide piece, and I was actually invited to be one of the scorers for the state to help go through, but I declined. I told them I'm just a little too busy these days, so I had to unfortunately decline. But maybe in the future, one day I'll resume that piece. But there's a lot of things you have to do. You have to put some packets in and so forth, and they kind of review the information, data, and just all manner of things, and then they make a decision of kind of who represents the state, similar like we do for teachers.
Thank you for sharing that, and I have no doubt they're going to win. No doubt.
So in answer to Debbie's question as to how we can help get Ken on the scoring board again, right?
I'm sorry.
I'm just saying.
Start writing letters now. I'm sorry, Dr. Atkins, is that it?
That is it. Just wanted to end on a positive note. So other than say that Dr. Pruitt will be here in my place tomorrow, so I know she'll do a great job, and we've got a really good team. So I will be I'll be doing our thing, or Teresa and I will be doing our thing, but knowing that the district's in great hands.
Great, great. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for being here. And with seeing no other business at hand, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.